Welcome everyone to the first hearing of this Portfolio Committee number 3, Education's inquiry into the planning delivery of school infrastructure in New South Wales. Before I commence, it's the custom of this Parliament to acknowledge the traditional inhabitants of this land, the Gadigal people of Aurora Nation, and I do that with all due respect, as well as acknowledging other important contributors to the history of this site, those who constructed the Parliament House building, and also the parliamentary staff who over many decades have supported MPs and made our work and representative role possible. We acknowledge and thank them all. Today we will be hearing from a range of stakeholders and most importantly the Transparency Organisation, the Audit Office of New South Wales, also the P&C, the Teachers Federation, Tweed Shire Council, local P&C groups from Lennox Head and Ulladulla, as well as parents from the Gilliston Primary School in the Hunter Valley. Before we commence, I'd like to make a few comments about the procedures for today's hearing. We're being broadcast live on the Parliament's website, and the transcript will go up when it becomes available. In accordance with the broadcasting guidelines, media reps are reminded to take responsibility for what they publish. Parliamentary privilege applies to these proceedings, but it does not apply to what witnesses might say outside the evidence of the hearing. Committee hearings are not intended to provide a forum for people to make adverse reflections about others under the cover of parliamentary privilege. Just leave that to the MPs, we look after that. And in this regard, it's important that witnesses focus on the issues at hand. Witnesses all have a right to procedural fairness, according to the resolution of the House in 2018. If witnesses can't answer a question today, it's available to you to take it on notice and provide an answer in writing within 21 days. And if you need any documents handed up by staff, that's also possible. In terms of the audibility of the hearing today, I remind both committee members and witnesses to speak into the microphone. For witnesses appearing remotely, please ensure your microphones are muted when you're not speaking. Everyone, of course, turn off their mobile phones. And I now welcome our first set of witnesses from the Audit Office of New South Wales, Margaret Crawford, Claudia Mignotto and Michael Thistlethwaite. And if you could please, starting with Claudia on my left, swear yourself in with your name, position and either the oath or affirmation. Thank you.
So I need to state my name and position.
Name, position, and then whether you're taking the oath or the affirmation to read it out.
Claudia Mignotto, Assistant Auditor General Performance Audit. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Margaret Crawford, Auditor General. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Michael Thistlethwaite, Director Performance Audit. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. And Margaret, is there an opening statement you'd like to make to the committee, please?
Thank you, Chair. Very, very briefly. Firstly, could I thank you for the invitation to speak to your committee today. As I said in our submission to this inquiry, the effective planning and delivery of infrastructure to meet the needs of the community has been and will continue to be an area of focus for my audit program. I've conducted 2 performance audits on this topic in the education cluster in recent years. Of particular interest today is my April 2021 report titled Delivering School Infrastructure. This examined the period up to June 2020, pre-COVID and quite a while back now. The objective of this audit was to assess the effectiveness of planning and delivery of new, upgraded and redeveloped schools to meet demand for public school education in New South Wales. The audit found that while the department had updated and improved its long-term strategic plan, further work needed to be done on developing and advising government on a pipeline of priority projects. The report found that the department had focused on existing projects, election commitments and other government announcements, and that this had diverted attention from identifying and advising on projects that could better meet present and future student needs. In my my 2021 report made 8 recommendations. Largely these focus on prioritising school infrastructure projects over a longer period, over a 10-year period, strengthening the quality of the project cost estimates, and establishing a continuous improvement program. Interestingly, the department did support the recommendations, but had asked us if the recommendations could be done over a 12-month period. We were asking for a 6-month period. We kept the 6 months because we were really hoping that they could, well, number one, a lot of the work had already been, according to them, in progress. And number two, we wanted those recommendations in place before this budget, so that they could inform this budget process. Apart from that, we really don't know now the status, so we're not going to be able to answer questions specific to the current status. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Our questions will range and rove around the committee, but we might start with Courtney Housos from the opposition.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Can I very much thank the three of you for your attendance today, and of course for your 2 excellent reports, which really form the basis of much of our discussions. And I appreciate what you were saying, that obviously you've done your reports, and so it's a reflection back rather than necessarily a reflection on what's currently being debated. On that note, can I just ask you, do you have future audits planned on the school in the school infrastructure space?
We're actually in the process at the moment of developing our next forward program, but I don't think we have a specific school infrastructure project over the next 12 months, Claudia.
Not specifically, and I think for the forward program, we might consider it as a cross-cutting theme, particularly with significant disruption to the education sector. How is government responding to changes there and reflecting that in the infrastructure needs of schools as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the consideration that we're going through at the moment.
Okay. Well, you can see this committee's interest, obviously, in the program and how it's being rolled out. I wanted to ask you just a few... Oh, sorry. And so in terms of your recommendations and the time frame for them to be implemented, do any of your ongoing audits of the education system, do they then check back in on these, or it's
No.
just kind of
Not necessarily, unless we decide to do a specific audit again in this space. In some respects, the 2021 audit was checking in following our 2017 audit, but that's not, we don't do that for all of our audits. The normal process, as you'd be aware, is that 12 to 18 months following a performance audit, the Public Accounts Committee of the Assembly does do follow-up on our recommendations and receives advice from agencies as to the status of their action.
right. Well, we'll have to... We don't like to leave things to our lower house colleagues. We like to do it ourselves up here. So I might just turn then specifically to your 2021 response. One of the issues, we've done a number of site visits as a committee. So we've done some to the northwest and some to the southwest of Sydney. But what really struck us in both of those is the way that poor planning obviously then requires a lot of demountables, which in itself, we sort of heard some different evidence about whether it's the quality of the learning space. But one of the concerns, I think, for the committee was the fact that it's very much compromising playground space. And so I noticed that in your report you talked about increased quality of education, spatial density. Did that consider playground space, or was that more about the actual size of the blocks themselves?
Mm-hmm. It didn't go specifically to the matter of demountables. I think our report recognised that there was a need for temporary arrangements in a lot of schools. So it didn't comment specifically on the implications of that for playground space. Is that correct?
That's correct. And we didn't go specifically in the report to how the adequacy of playground spaces was considered in the planning process as well.
Did your report look at this relative size of blocks that one thing that's really struck us is that the size of blocks seem to be getting smaller and smaller.
It didn't comment on that.
Okay. And so that doesn't form part of the business case analysis that you were doing?
The size of the block forms part of the business case.
Okay.
And our findings were really around that early consultation with stakeholders and ensuring that the schools will be fit for purpose. So we do talk about schools being fit for purpose in the report, which would include things such as the size of the block.
Okay. Can I just ask you? I didn't see it in the report. You said that there was 12 case studies that you analysed. Did I miss that in the report, or is that something that you deliberately didn't include, or?
We analyse those 12 as a cohort.
Okay.
We don't specifically reference all of them.
Yeah, I did
so
notice there are a few.
We've used them as case studies to highlight where we identified issues.
Okay. Would you mind, and just taking on notice, and if you can, providing us with the 12, and if not, if you don't want to, that's okay.
We'll take it on notice.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
No worries.
I really then wanted to go to the question of the planning projections and the way that interacts with the business case. Some of the evidence that we have heard on our site visits is that the development is happening much faster than expected, or perhaps that the development's happening much more quickly, or that perhaps families have bigger sizes than they expected, or even in some parts of the state, because of housing affordability, we're seeing 2 families move into houses instead of just one, which is causing obviously much more rapid growth. Did your analysis look at, in terms of the business case, the quality of the planning projections information that was provided?
It was certainly looking not so much at the quality of that, but the way the agencies worked together to make sure that they were taking into account the most current and relevant information for planning purposes. There is some commentary in the report around ways that I suppose the local changes could be brought to attention. And basically is just arguing for greater cooperation or continued cooperation between agencies to get the best, projections possible. Michael, did you want to add to that?
Yes, I'll just add that the department is reliant on the New South Wales State Government Common Planning Assumptions, which is based fundamentally on census data, which can become outdated. So the department does do some work to validate that at a local school level. But it's certainly a challenge for the department in having accurate population forecasts in order to ensure that they're meeting the local need.
Yeah, I mean, we heard from principals that they were literally at the end of the school year phoning around developers to find out how many blocks they were going to have coming online. Like, they're trying to do their own projections at a local level. I think there is clearly a breakdown in the planning process. There is clearly an issue with the information that's being given to schools when they're filling so quickly and requiring so many demountables. So I think that's something certainly that our inquiry is very interested in.
It was definitely a part of our recommendations that there be close cooperation to try to do better in that space. Having said that, I think our report also recognised improvement on what had been happening previously. So while there is always room for further improvement, things had progressed quite well.
I just had a couple more questions there. In your 2017 report, and again in your 2021 report, you make the acknowledgement that we are going to run out of classrooms. That when you talk about that, are you factoring in demountable classrooms, or you're saying that? Yeah,
we're basing that on the predictions of the department.
Yeah.
So that's really.
And
we're not making our own assessment.
No,
we're
course.
relying on the assessment of the department.
My understanding is that learning spaces include the demountables as well, but that might be a point of clarification with the department.
Okay. I think that was nearly. Oh, okay. Sorry. Just my one final question. So in 2017, your performance audit said that over the next 15 years, that the population of the schools will increase by 21%, which is a pretty significant increase. But given what we've seen in parts of particularly the outer suburbs of Sydney, we think that's probably on track. Did you, as part of either of your analyses, do any analysis to see whether that was across the board or whether that was specifically around some local school districts?
We were looking at how School Infrastructure New South Wales was making that assessment itself. So I think it really goes back to our earlier announcement about the basis of their projections and some of the limitations with that.
Other questions? Sorry? Other questions? Abigail, Scott? Well, I might ask... Yep, Scott?
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your report. When you looked through the report, I think at the time school infrastructure funding had increased by 5.5 times on what it was in 2015, 2016. In the last budget, it's now increased sort of sevenfold from that figure. How much of an impact did you find that sort of growth in expenditure was having on School Infrastructure New South Wales in managing that large amount of money and effectively upskilling with so many more projects each and every year?
Okay, look, our report does acknowledge a large increase in the budget and the announcement of a large number of new projects. School Infrastructure New South Wales was really set up to respond to that, to put in place the expertise that the department needed to deliver on the commitments of government. So that's really what it was very focused on. So I'm not sure that it was overwhelmed by that, but it was actually set up to deliver on that commitment of government.
And do you think it is set up to continue to deliver with that sort of growth? Yes.
Again, we can't comment on what's happening in the last couple of years, but at the time it was certainly progressing through delivery of the commitments. What we commented on was it was so focused on the large number of projects that had already been announced, it was not doing enough work to prioritise future projects over the longer term.
And with respect to the 12 case studies, how much variance was there between the business plans of those 12 case studies? Were there some that you found to be particularly good or some that were particularly poor, and what do you attribute some of that variance to, if there was that variance?
Largely, I think we found that the business cases that were in place before School Infrastructure New South Wales was established were not as robust. So we certainly identified in the report that since the establishment of School Infrastructure New South Wales, there had been a maturing of project methodologies, including business cases were looking a lot better than they were in previous years.
And in terms of that improvement in business cases, what were you seeing in terms of the changes that were delivered on the ground effectively for schools? Were they matching the population growth better because of that planning from School Infrastructure New South Wales and those business plans?
Some of the business cases were not at the stage of project delivery, so they were approved business cases. What the report refers to is better scope identification, better risk management, better budget planning approaches. But we do still note that there's opportunities for further improvement in those regards as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ms Crawford, when you said that at this stage you've got no idea whether the government is acting on the recommendations because they've taken a 12-month implementation timeframe, is it the practice of the Audit Office to write to ministers every 3 months to say, can you give us an update, or you just wait for their final deliberation?
No, that's not our practice. Our practice is to rely on the normal process, which is the follow-up by the Public Accounts Committee of all of our performance audits 12 to 18 months after they're completed. We then support the committee in, directing their areas of attention and providing any information that we do have to help them inquire into the status of response to our recommendations. Occasionally, we may choose to do a performance or a further performance audit that goes specifically to follow up, but that is a choice that we make on occasion.
In your opening statement, also the report, you refer to the fact there's too much focus on delivering existing projects, election commitments and other government announcements. I suppose in the world of politics we take that as a code for pork barrelling, so-called. But you also say there's a need for, and I quote, evidence-based cost-benefit analysis framework for school infrastructure. Is there any evidence of the evidence-based cost-benefit analysis at the core of what's happening inside school infrastructure in New South Wales?
First, could I correct you? I don't think we said there was too much focus being paid to the delivery of government projects. We said that there was focus being paid to that, and perhaps not enough focus being placed on establishing priorities for the future. In terms of the quality of the business cases, my colleague Michael has already commented that we saw good improvement in that space, but there was still room for further improvement. I'm not sure that I can comment beyond that.
Are the business cases published, or is there an argument for their publication?
The business cases are not published, no.
Do you believe there is an argument to publish them in the name of transparency?
I don't think we can comment on that because it wasn't in our report.
Right.
We're all for transparency, but I guess a business case is an internal document of government. Mostly, they're usually, they're developed to help deliver on a project. Transparency is always good.
Yeah, I think it would help, because when parents get upset about a sea of demountables, naturally, emotionally wanting the very best for their children, I think government really needs to give an explanation as to how they got it so badly wrong, like Oran Park Public School, the one I know best in southwest Sydney. But on that planning forward approach, I suppose from where I've lived for so long, going back even to Laurie Brereton and Beds for the West, the constant struggle in Western Sydney with these growth areas that have now accelerated beyond anything we've ever seen over the past 5 years. There's an ongoing argument about the government provision, not just in schools, but health and other services, transport, roads, rail, for growth areas. And one of the things we've elicited so far in this inquiry is that School Infrastructure New South Wales works with deep-eyed demographers at local government data level, which seems very broad brush. I mean, Blacktown local government area is the biggest in the country, and it's sort of almost as big as Tasmania. So that is not all that useful to just be hovering at LGA data level, and then School Infrastructure New South Wales then tries to drill down to school catchment areas for their forward planning using their 15 staff and other government agencies. Wouldn't it make a lot of sense, whether we're talking about health, schools, transport, to have a standardised area of expertise, a unit inside the government that has accurate, sophisticated forecasting down to census collector districts of how many people are going to be living in this geographic space, and then to build all government planning around that forecast growth so that we get it right? I mean, some of these things are off the radar, ridiculous. For instance, there's 1.3 million people going to move in west of the M7, but no even government allocation for land for a new public hospital, for a new city effectively the size of Adelaide that has 4 public hospitals. So we go through this cycle of ministers resisting sophisticated demographic planning, allegations of pork barrelling, election cycle, other side gets in, same thing happens. Don't we need some consolidated cross-government demographic planning unit that publishes information about where we're expecting the people to go and itemises the natural servicing needs of that community in education, health and all the state responsibilities, and then that's all transparent, and we can then judge the decisions of government around more sophisticated demographic planning?
Well,
there's a lot there, but wouldn't it solve a 50-year problem in Western Sydney of the people come without the services arriving?
Mr. Latham, I think we have to stick to what we looked at in this audit, and we did comment on improved planning and consultation between agencies. We also did call for further improvements that should be made to capture that local level information. But there are internal governance arrangements within education that do provide, local input into the process. I don't think I can comment beyond that.
But do you find this problem in your other areas of audit analysis, that it's in hospitals, it's in community health centres, it's in transport, that we just haven't got transparent, sophisticated demographic planning data that does justice to the servicing needs of growth areas like out of Western Sydney.
I'm not sure that we have called that out in our other audits. In my time.
The only one that I can sort of summon to mind is our report on sharing school facilities, which looked at the need to take a broader sort of district level view about the need for school and other types of facilities in particular areas. But as the Auditor General said, what we've gone to in this report is the improvements that have been made. We've identified options for further improvements, and then ultimately I think it's up to the department to work out the how to take those recommendations forward.
Right. Well, maybe could I suggest it's something that could be looked at, because it would help solve a lot of problems across a lot of portfolios, and all this stuff is just so haphazard and random. I met with Brad Hazard about that new public hospital in outer Western Sydney, and he had the then Health Department chief there who said, based on the Finnish model, we don't build any more new public hospitals in New South Wales. And I thought, well, there's not much comfort for people in outer Western Sydney. You'll see them going up in Rouse Hill and extensions elsewhere, country hospitals, but it's just such an arbitrary, haphazard way of doing it. And it's the same with schools, where at Oran Park, looking at the sea of demountables there at one time, it just felt like it was a complete rip-off of the local community compared to what other places had been provided with by way of school infrastructure. So, I think it's an interesting area where a government across all portfolios could improve with some transparent, sophisticated demographic planning that goes a bit beyond LGA data and then trying to scramble around to work out what it means for a school catchment.
Well, clearly in our audit program we have focused on infrastructure projects in health, transport and the like, and would continue to do so. We'll take on board your comments in our planning process for our next work program, Mr. Latham.
And in your report, you made mention of the need for better sharing of data on the forecast needs with relevant planning agencies. Is it a question of sharing data, or everyone having access to the very best data with some new sophisticated unit inside government? It does all seem very random, the way these things are decided upon.
Again,
and if you're a pork barrelling minister, I think your great friend is a lack of hard, reliable demographic data where you can just say, oh, well, we really don't know where the people are going to move, so for political reasons they're building a school or a hospital in a certain place.
Again, this audit actually found that there had been improvements in sharing of common data in relation to planning, but still recognise, as Michael said, that sometimes that information is no longer as current as you would want, and so that there is a need for local input as well, and made that recommendation for going forward.
Thank you. Other questions?
I've got a couple if not.
I have one.
Yeah, sure.
Just earlier on, if I may, you indicated in your opening statement, Ms. Crawford, that your audit found further work is required on a pipeline of projects. I'm sorry, I'm just sitting in for another colleague. Can you elaborate on this pipeline of projects that you're required to do?
What we're after there is for longer term planning. To build a school or to make school improvements is a lot of money, and there is a high level of need across the state. So what we're arguing for there is that more effort needed to go into planning for priorities. What we found was that the department is really quite good now doing needs assessment, but translating those needs assessments into where are the key priorities for projects was what was lacking at that time. So that's what we're calling for.
Ms. Crawford, you talked about there were some areas where the budget funded projects that weren't identified as needed by the Department of Education. One of those we know through some other work that we've done through SO52s is the South Nowra Warragee school that has been promised down there. Now, I appreciate that may fall outside of your time frame. Are you able to tell us which were the projects that had been that you identified that were not needed but still being pursued?
Ooh, I'm
and
not
I'm
sure
happy if you
that,
want to take it on notice.
No, it's okay up to a point. I'm not sure we said schools were not needed.
Okay.
I mean, there is even for ones that were previously announced by government, there's always a business case conducted before construction occurs. So need is established. What we are arguing for, though, is that, I guess, a relative thing, the relative merits of one project over another. And I think there's an exhibit on Exhibit 4 in our report that sets out what was recommended by the department versus announcements made.
Okay. Our time's about to run out, but what I would just like to do is, as you do consider going forward your future program of events, of audits, I would just encourage you to consider looking again into school infrastructure. Some of the information that we've found around the Tallawong public school and the way that the projections are being considered and then treated for the total economic cost and planning and the way the money's being funded. Anyway, I've got a couple of emails that we've received from through an SO52. I think they would be helpful for you to see that there are still serious concerns about the way that the department is running the building of schools, and I'd be interested if you do have any reflections on notice. I don't want to put you on the spot today, but if you'd like to have a look at these and then tell us anything that you would consider concerning from that would
Certainly.
be quite helpful.
We'll take that into consideration in addition to the Chair's request about planning processes.
Thank you very
Just
much.
on that, could I ask, having said that it'd be good to publish the benefit cost studies for major capital works, if a minister deviates from those recommendations, do you think it's a good idea to also require the minister to publish in writing the reasons why they've deviated from the School Infrastructure New South Wales recommendation?
Mr. Lathan, I couldn't comment on that because that's not something I've specifically audited.
Chair, if I could just ask one very quick question.
Yes,
Sorry. Ms. Crawford, in your, and apologies, I can't remember if I read this or not in your report, but did you look at the infrastructure funding from the department to private schools as well as public schools?
We didn't in this report, no.
Okay. Are you aware of the, is that something on your radar, I guess, of the sort of level of government funding that's going to private school infrastructure?
It hasn't been something that we've audited specifically. We did do an audit previously on funding to schools, more operational funding.
It was generally on funding to non-government schools.
Yeah.
So that audit did find in some areas some opportunities to improve transparency around how that funding was used. But that's probably the most direct finding to the question that you're asking.
Thank you.
No other questions? I'll thank the witnesses for their participation and the quality of their report on school infrastructure and all the other tremendous general work you do. I've mentioned that at another committee, but I certainly, and I know other members of Parliament really appreciate the quality of what the Audit Office does, and in an environment where, you know, sometimes government doesn't want to hear these things. We certainly appreciate your professionalism and directness in making certain outcomes known to us. Thanks again.
Thank you again, Chair, and I do acknowledge all the staff in the Audit Office. I'm very blessed to have such a professional group of people.
Thank you. Thanks for your time this morning. Thank you. Yvonne and Alan, thanks for your time and
I'm not sure.
participation representing the Federation of Parents and Citizens Association of New South Wales. And I think you need to swear in, is that right? Yep. If you could just read out your name, position and either the oath or affirmation. Thank you. Yvonne.
My name is Yvonne Hiltz, Vice President of PNC Federation of New South Wales. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
I'm Alan Gardner. I am the Secretary and, along with Yvonne, a member of the Board of the PNC Federation, and I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. And thank you for your submission, but it's also available to you now to make a short opening statement to the committee, if you wish.
Yes, I can spend a few minutes.
Thank you.
I did take the opportunity to read some of the other submissions, and I'm pleased to see some of the comments that we've made came through there. And I'd just like to highlight, to begin with, reading particularly the other submissions from P&Cs, the degree of frustration that comes through in dealing with school infrastructure in New South Wales, and particularly with respect to secrecy. And as an example, there are a couple of comments in a number of submissions about non-disclosure agreements, which are required from community representatives on project reference groups, and I think that is definitely worth challenging and has been in a number of the submissions. Also, on the terms of reference 1H about school design that promotes health and safety, our submission did not include many comments, and upon reflection I think we could add a few points there. The ones that I particularly point out would be to ensure that schools have adequate play space, recreational areas, place to eat lunch, both undercover and not undercover. And I think that was brought out in a couple of the P&C submissions. And another point on that topic that I'd raise is air conditioning. And you may recall that government policy is that all new school buildings should be air conditioned. However, unless that's changed in the last 2 years, my understanding is that policy is that it refers to teaching spaces and does not include offices, staff rooms, principals' offices, etc., and maybe not even the sick bay. I think personally that that is wrong, and it's astonishing to me that anyone would build office space these days which is not air conditioned. And it detracts, of course, from the working conditions of the people who are there, which is detrimental to education. And while we're talking about admin areas, as schools are expanded, my observation, perhaps not with full evidence, but certainly anecdotally, is I doubt that the support areas, offices and admin, actually keeps up proportionally to the size of the school following any expansion. Look at that if in your position. Final comment, there's a couple of references in various submissions to cluster planning or area planning of district schools and master planning of school sites. I think that would be highly desirable, but my current assessment is that school infrastructure is more reactive and they're not really at the point where they are able or actually planning ahead in any sensible way. Certainly happy to talk more about that at some future point in your questioning. That concludes my opening statement. I'm obviously very happy to take any questions.
Yep, thank you. Courtney?
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your submission, but especially for your time today. I wanted to start with where you started, which is the importance of play space. That has been an issue. I raised it previously with the Auditor General. It's certainly been an issue in our site visits that has really struck us. Yes. We've done a number of visits in the northwest and the southwest of Sydney, metropolitan Sydney, and the exponential growth of the school has then impacted by seeing demountables placed on play areas. And there was one school in particular that is facing the loss of almost their entire play space next year as they try and accommodate the growth, but also then construct some new classrooms.
Yes.
The really interesting feedback for us from the principal was that there's having twofold issues here. We are having behavioural issues because kids aren't being able to get out the energy that they need to.
Yep.
But when they are getting out and finally exercising, they're actually running into each other, which is then causing behavioural issues and more issues for the teacher. So especially in these areas, new growth areas where we don't see a lot of backyards, or smaller sizes backyards, the importance of play space at school actually becomes more important. So I'd just be interested in any thoughts that you have or any feedback that you've received from your members specifically around the importance of play space.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Honourable Courtney Housens. It's
just Courtney's.
Oh, Courtney. Right. Okay. First time in Parliament. It's interesting too. Yes, with all the demountable space, when there's a lack of teaching rooms as well, and then the demountables take up space. But the other issue is there's not actually enough covered area for children to play on wet days. Now, given our climate currently and the number of wet days we've had in Sydney, many of the children aren't even allowed out into these areas which are uncovered for play, for recess and for lunch. And then feedback then for not only the children being frustrated for not having outside space, they then aren't getting a break from the teacher, not being able to vent out, and then the teachers are having difficulty getting the kids settled down because they actually haven't changed from the classroom for a break. They're staying inside all day. Now these are schools which actually have outside areas, so they're not inside buildings, which some of our schools are, but they don't have covered areas that they can safely run to or walk to be able to actually have play. So that's in addition to schools which have also got demountables taking up valuable space. purely because of lack of teaching space areas. So yes, it is a problem.
So one of the things that we had heard from the department is that there's a move towards building schools without school ovals. What would your opinion be on that, particularly for high school students? But
Yeah, it's not the right policy.
No,
Yeah.
They need the area. High school students as well.
particularly.
Yeah.
But,
for the
you
same
know, if you
reasons.
think yourself, if you're sitting inside all day, which no doubt is the majority now of the the workforce, it's not productive for us, but it's even harder for these children, particularly when they're going through big growth spurts and hormones. They need to get out and play. And if we want them to be activated and learning, we need to let them at least physically have some activity. And if we look at how we're wanting to create healthy environments with our food in our canteens, providing healthy food for students, part of that needs more physical play as well. You know, we don't want to have a generation of children not getting enough physical activity because we are not giving them enough land to play on. It's not only good for their learning, but also for their physical mental health as well. I mean, these children in the last 2 years have already had diminished amounts of playtime with COVID, with restrictions of being either housed, homeschooled or home taught. But then when they have gone back into schools within COVID, to help reduce and minimise if there is an outbreak of COVID, they're being restricted for what time they get on the playground, and then they're having to then restrict the amount of children coming out. So they've already had major restrictions in the last 2 years. That's with schools who actually have facilities to house kids to be able to have play areas.
Yeah, I think if there's any move by the department to limit the amount of play space that's provided, I think it's just penny pinching, and any kind of discussion to justify it is just trying to hide that's where they're going. I think there should be a recognition that all children are different, and there are some children in particular who just need more physical activity during the day as part of their education. Other children probably fine without so much, but that's not going to work for every child. There are differences.
Just on that, obviously, yeah, all children are quite different, and I guess there are some children that need a quiet space sometimes. I guess what's your experiences of, how many schools have that sort of facility, and what is needed?
I don't have evidence for actually what the statistics are, but certainly as an active PNC member, which I have been now for 5 years and have been on the board since last year, there is a real struggle not only for the physical space to provide a quiet place, there's also a staffing issue. So with the teacher shortage, and that's a different topic, I'm sure, for a different room, there is not enough facilities for many schools to have enough teachers on the playground for the outside activities, which obviously we need supervision, to then create more quiet spaces as well. They either don't have safe areas, which aren't already being used, or facilities to have supervision there, which you have to have supervision if you're segregating certain children. But I certainly know in some of my area there is a concern for not providing needs for those children who are overstimulated by being in a general classroom. And can I say, with the ratio of children per classroom and the size of classrooms is overstimulating for children, I think, even without those who are recognised with needing more quieter areas. So they're already squashed in their classrooms and then don't have enough time to decompress in the playground. And certainly, to your point, I think for many schools they're struggling to find a sufficient quiet area that is supervised and also allows for enough children to actually feel that they've had some time out. I don't have any specific evidence, only what I hear from parents.
Again, anecdotally, in my 20 years of having a child or one or more children in the public education system, I have never seen a school with a quiet space. So
It's a
I think
library,
that is a
but
gap.
that's
not
that's not
necessarily
quiet
a
time.
quiet space either. But yes.
And the librarians on the school grounds as part of their supervision for the rest of the school.
Thank you.
I want to move on to a slightly different question around school zonings, and that's something that this committee has pursued in a different forum, but I'm really interested in the role that your members give you feedback about the role of parents in consultation if there are changes to those school zonings. And the other thing that I'm interested in is, obviously there is some capacity to engage with parents who are currently at the school, but we know that families are making decisions about where they move and where they want to send their children when they are purchasing a home.
Correct.
Yep.
So is there any capacity to engage with parents before they actually get to school?
To my knowledge, parents are not consulted
No.
at all or school communities at all about changes to catchment areas of school.
No, we had a zoning change 3 years ago in my school and only found out after letters were sent out to parents saying your child is no longer in zone, we're not accepting your child next year.
And how do you feel about that as the
that was
peak
enough.
representative of
It's
parents?
poor. My local high school had a zoning change at the end of 2021, quite recently, and we found out when a slightly shell-shocked principal said, I've just been told that next year the zoning changes and that over the next couple of years our school numbers will increase by another 200 plus students.
And how does that affect the role of parents in terms of being partners in education if it's just simply dropped on them? They've made life decisions about where they're going to move, the school that they're planning to send their children, and yet there is no consultation about changes to school zonings with them.
I think you can draw your own conclusions.
Yeah.
It can be quite significant.
And I'm primary school, and what that does is that I find that in some demographics where there is option for private and budget availability for parents to go private, they go to private. There's more stability, I don't know if there's more collaboration between, I think they're PTAs and the parent community,
Yep.
but they're given the fees that they pay and what they then receive back seems to be different. So then where parents do have a choice, they will move out of primary public education, and by year 5, many have already started to move into private because they've got more stability of zoning as well.
That's right, more control over where their child ends up. I think again, probably outside the scope of this committee, I think there is a good reason to have a general look at catchment areas of schools. There are definitely plenty of anomalies floating around, and also influenced by the availability of girls' schools, boys' high schools, etc., and co-ed schools. But even apart from that, as an example, my recollection is that a student living in Barara, where the nearest high schools would be Asquith Girls, Asquith Boys, but they are actually zoned for Gosford, which makes not a lot of sense. And an example closer to me, Killarney Heights High School includes a zone which is across Middle Harbour, which makes it very hard to get, although as a crow flies, it might be relatively close, but that's not actually a good decision.
But it goes to a problem, which is that school zonings need to be done locally in consultation with parents, in consultation with school communities, and not just simply as lines drawn on a map by a bureaucrat somewhere.
No, I understand trying to change the school boundary can be extremely controversial for the
course.
reasons that you outlined, but that's, to me, not a reason to shy away from doing it.
Yeah, and that the process needs to, and so the PNC would definitely agree that there needs to be parent consultation as part of that.
Yes, yeah, well, effectively community consultation.
Yeah,
because there's
absolutely.
Future parents as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
No, I would completely agree with that. So I'm very helpful.
Just following up on
sorry.
those points, is that what you meant when you, in your introductory remarks, Mr. Gardner, referred to secrecy?
Only one aspect. What I had more in mind at the time was about school building programs. And what's going on there, what's approved, what's in the pipeline, if there is a pipeline, even design processes. And the NDA, for instance, with a project reference group which is set up for every proposed new build, there is a project reference group. It has one community representative, one PNC representative, but that person has to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and so they cannot discuss any of the proposal or options which might be on the table with anybody else. And so all of the consultation is on that individual's shoulders, which is both unfair and wrong, and I think excessive secrecy.
But also is counterintuitive to the role that they should be playing as a community representative, right?
Yes.
That they should be able to
Right.
consult with the community and then reflect the community views as part of the planning process.
Yes, and that would explain why in quite a few submissions there are references to these NDAs. That's more the context, but secrecy generally is an issue, I think,
Sorry,
with school
yeah,
infrastructure.
Just one more question. You've recounted a number of inadequacies in terms of playground, play space, undercover, air conditioning, and various other issues that you've raised. When you raise them, who do you raise those issues to? Do you raise them with the department, or do you raise them directly with the minister or with school principals? And I'm just curious as to what responses you as a federation get, and do they take the federation seriously? What cooperation, what work do you do, and how much does the government or the minister and the Department of Planning respond to your concerns?
I think there's a multi-step part. At a local level, the PNC would be hopefully collaborating or working with the principal. If there is a fracture between the principal and the PNC, then that might be escalated faster. But usually the PNC picks up a lot of funding sometimes to get these COLAs, which is like the outdoor learning environment. So for some schools who have a very active PNC and are in a demographic that they can do their own private fundraising, they can fast track and get some of these projects underway and complete, provided assets and infrastructure can get them done. But for schools who don't have that funding arm or a committee of people who can take on the volunteer work, like we're volunteers doing this, and there's many hours behind, an election barbecue or various fundraising elements. But so at a local level, the parents would be trying to, work with the principal. If they don't get support, they would escalate it through to their department. Some schools would then start to go broader and look at their local members to go, how can you help? Do you have other avenues? Because there's only so much a parent body can fund before, assets have to be involved. So it's not like if I said I've got $100,000, let's go build a classroom, or because we've got the money doesn't mean we get the build. So there's always that challenge of funding is an issue, but even if you have funding, you might still be in a queue for 3 or 5 years to get it done. So then as a federation, Alan has more reference as to what
Yeah, I think
we're doing.
my summary comment would be talking to school infrastructure on these kind of issues is like talking into a void. We make comments, I don't know where they go, what happens. It's hard to see what has changed as a result. And I think
Do they write back and say, look, we'll be doing this?
Not in a timely manner.
When we get
At a local level, I've got
comments back,
experience.
they are standard departmental kind of responses, thank you for your input, we're looking at it, etc. I don't think there's a lot of substance in general coming back. Right. Again, it ties to my comment about speaking into a void.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, so I think what that also engenders, and I feel this personally, is just a sense of jadedness and what's the point? It just doesn't do anything.
And at a local level, you get a community who are guns are blazing for fundraising, and you've got a window of opportunity when you've got a certain group of parents who are very motivated to improve the resources and opportunities within the school. If they start to get fatigued or they really see that nothing is happening, that parent body and that group of parents will suddenly wane, or they'll graduate out of the school, and then you're left with a school who either has to find another committed group of parents, and the school doesn't find it, it comes from within the parent community. And if that doesn't happen, then they go, once again, we're in public education, and and they'll go, if we've got other options, we'll choose them. And unfortunately, then leaves a school without a mechanism to rally up enough support to, shake the can to find some funding, which really shouldn't be at the grassroots level, that a parent is having to fund basketball courts and put in preschool playground areas just so that the kids have somewhere to play. But eventually parents go, if we can find enough money, does that help fast track it? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But the funding responsibility still seems to feel a lot more skewed if a PNC can rally behind it and champion, because a principal also has to manage and run the school. They're not there for fundraising and project managing and doing asset management, which I know that they are, but we still want them to be focused on educating our children, not trying to figure out where they're going to find 50 grand to put in a playground, just so our kids have a good environment to play.
Ms. Boyd?
On a couple of other inquiries in relation to transport projects that I've been on, we've heard from schools and parents who have been concerned about the impact of air pollution on the children, particularly where there is no air conditioning in classrooms. We have schools who are, actively running sort of idle off programs where they're making sure that people aren't idling their cars outside, but then you have massive construction projects and other things impacting on the air quality. To your knowledge, is there any sort of prioritisation of air conditioning for either schools that are going to bear the sort of brunt of the hot weather soonest, or those schools that are in those sort of heavily polluted areas?
And then throw in a bit of COVID.
Yeah, exactly.
I haven't heard about anything specifically to do with air pollution, but I am aware of the departmental policy regarding schools which meet a threshold of, I think, was over 30 degrees in
Mean maximum,
January,
yeah.
etc., as being prioritised. There's still a backlog of schools to be upgraded in that area, but all schools should have air conditioning, heating and cooling. And as you know, there are still plenty of schools which have gas heating, unflued and flued, and I think we should be past the whole concept of gas heating in the first place for other reasons. So there's certainly a backlog there, and as I say, all schools should be air conditioned, fully air conditioned, including the offices.
Because the I guess the science around the impact of, I should say, gas heating on children, particularly in relation to sort of rates of asthma, etc., as well as
Yes.
this sort of background air pollution. It's getting more and more every year. It's getting better and better, and our understanding is growing. Have you seen any kind of change from the department in its focus on those issues in the last?
Well, we saw some with COVID. With obviously, there's a big thing around air ventilation, and that's highlighted a need that was already growing as a problem, which was ventilation generally in schools. I haven't seen anything expedited fast enough though to get ventilation happening in schools. I know air coolers purifiers went in and they did a report last year, so there's been there's been machines put in classrooms, but overall I still think there's a massive gap. And also too, we look at the size of classrooms. Some of these classrooms have 30 kids in it, and they were never designed to have 30 children in that class. Never mind outside of the COVID challenges, you've got rooms that are not ventilated well, overpopulated with 30 kids. To your earlier point about having time out, these classrooms now don't even have spaces in their rooms for a child to sit in a corner and just catch a moment. That's why they're being put outside the classroom where there's often they're not supervised. But the teacher also doesn't have a facility in the room to go, child, go and sit in the corner and just catch a moment, which I'd imagine all of us at some point in our lives would appreciate, being in a corner to catch a breath. So we've got multiple issues of overcrowded classrooms, poor ventilation, aside from the weather and the climate, but now we've got COVID challenges that aren't being addressed quick enough. And then we've got children not being able to get enough outside time due to either uncovered areas, which therefore they can't play outside. And then, we just don't have enough classrooms. And we could talk toilets all day. Can I just talk about the state of toilets in our schools? It is absolutely disgraceful. Like, we have children who live in, housing estates who've most probably got better access to toilets than our children in all schools. I'm not talking just, I have schools in high socioeconomic areas who have worse toilets than other schools, and there shouldn't be a difference between what socioeconomic area you are, but it is absolutely disgraceful, the toilets our children have to go to the bathroom in. We have parents complaining that their children have UTIs, bladder issues, because their children refuse to go to the toilet during the day for either toilet stops. Therefore, they're not drinking water in the classrooms, so they're dehydrated all day, not peeing, coming home, and then we're talking about we've got behavioural issues in the classroom. Let's have a look at some of the functions the children aren't able to do. And literally, can I say, P&C spend so many meetings and so much funding on toilets, and we are restricted by what we can and can't do because they're inside buildings. But the hours discussed around toilets would be astounding if people knew how much we talk about toilets. This is a basic, fundamental right.
What's an example of that? And is the problem privacy, stench,
Definitely.
unclean?
We've got photos. We've
all
got
of the above?
doors unhinged. You've got vandalism left, right, and through it. For the primary school children, there's spiders, and I appreciate we're in Australia, but cleaning them out would also help. It's not soap dispensers don't work, so they can't wash their hands for sanitary. Lighting, stench. Some of them have grout that have been there for 50 or 60 years.
Yes.
Grout has now changed that they can now have it that urine doesn't go into the grout. But 50 years ago, whatever went onto the floors went into the grout. You've got plumbing issues. You've got security issues of doors not locking properly. You've got toilet seats being yanked off and therefore not replaced. So it limits the amount of toilets. It goes.
But the high socioeconomic schools that you mentioned, what's an example of that?
All of those.
All of them?
All
Yes.
of those.
So
In my area, all of those.
What's your area? please?
I'm in the inner west.
So I'm on
Yeah.
the North Shore, and my local high school is currently going through a process with Assets Management School Infrastructure to replace many of the older toilets. These are 50-year-old toilets, and they've got exactly the issues that Yvonne's been mentioning, and that means the entire toilet area has to be completely jackhammered out and a completely new room put in to do that. And that's to get rid of the stench.
Yes, so
And
we...
Mr Chairman, it's Catherine Keeper here.
Oh.
Can I just make a comment that the toilet refurbishment gets caught up with the entire maintenance program for the school? And many years ago there was actually a separate program for toilets. I passionately support the evidence that's been given now. So I suppose I just, in terms of this inquiry, I would like to just ask the witnesses, would they support a special separate program for school toilets to be prioritised so the school's not waiting for the mega $1 million
Yes.
redevelopment in order to have this issue addressed?
Yes.
Yes.
I believe some of that is actually going on from the department. I think that my local high school has benefited from that, but yes. We did a survey of local PNCs in the northern Sydney area. The top issue which came from PNCs was toilets.
Same with the Inner West.
And I think from memory, the next issue was the whole school bus pick-up, drop-off of students with the safety issues associated. Time to your earlier question.
And it's the cost. So even getting something changed as the taps in the bathroom. Now, I appreciate we have to have standard of build, but if we go out to a local builder and get all of the requirements, it saves, and often it's funded by PNCs because it's faster. It's a quarter of what the bill would be when it comes through from assets. Never mind, it then takes 12 months with assets in some cases of what I've been involved where we can get that fixed within 3 to 4 weeks and get all of the safety protocol. But it's the cost that's prohibitive as well, where a PNC go, we can find that $5,000 to replace the taps today. It's a sausage sizzle, you know, but then when we get an actual bill of it's going to cost $15,000 to $20,000 and that's part of the school's budget, you know, you think, well, what's changed between $5,000 and $20,000 for 6 taps to be replaced, and where we can get it done, again, following protocol, in say 3 to 4 weeks, usually by a local parent who wants to contribute back to the community, or we go in the queue with assets and it can take 12 months, and a huge amount of project management from a principal who ideally I'd prefer would be focusing on the education of our children instead of 6 toilet taps.
So what's the system then to be able to get more of that happening, where you've got the 6 toilet taps being taken, that work being undertaken by local communities rather than being taken through the whole assets process?
So, a couple of
What's the
comments.
incentive mechanism?
Firstly, things like that should not have to be funded by PNC fundraising. That should be departmental cost in the first place. But that issue aside, the department has been very hard-edged over the last few years about everything has to go through standard departmental processes, which means minor maintenance has to go through their master contracts, and that's got associated bureaucratic overhead and cost. And any building works has to go through the government tendering system, which used not be the case, which imposes extra, not just time delay, but extra costs. There's definitely a premium which is being paid
Absolutely.
by the government for going through that process and pre-qualified tenderers. I understand the objective, work done in the school has to be done to a requisite standard, but that can be done and historically was done. But at the moment, we are still living with every project of more than $30,000 has to be managed by school infrastructure / assets management, has to go through government tendering. There was a move from school infrastructure not long after it was created saying that was the rule for now, but as a school demonstrates that it can do small projects in compliance with the rules, effectively not causing problems, then they would have an increased limit. That there's been no follow through.
So rather than the $30,000, where do you think that limit should be set?
I don't know. I thought the concept was good. As a school demonstrates that it has the capability to reliably do projects, then yes, that could be progressively upped.
And I think it depends on what the project is, but for something like changing taps in a bathroom, it's different to say putting on a new basketball roof, and I understand that there's implications if, you know...
Safety implications, you know?
100%. But there's definitely a lot of red tape that slows down some of the smaller projects that are actually are urgent, you know. Children being able to go to the bathroom safely with proper lighting and a toilet that flushes and to wash their hands, I don't think should have a 6 to 12 month wait when we actually have facilities and funding often to go, we can fix that.
I think on the toilet area, I would commend you to the submission from Concord High School PNC, which had some very good descriptions and a few photographs.
Well, we went to Concord High School. So
you did, excellent.
And that's not actually that unusual. I know the commentary was quite detailed, but it doesn't take many schools for you to actually see that you'd actually ask yourself, would I go to this toilet? It's an Aaron Brockovich piece of would you have the glass of water? And I'd say for, regardless if you're a parent or not, you wouldn't, if you had a choice, want to go to many of these toilets. And I think that's a real tragedy for our children. They're sitting there dehydrated or busting to go to the bathroom or nervous to go to the bathroom. You've got to think, are they actually learning or are they sitting there distracted? And then there's a compounding impact to their health, mental, physical, emotional, and the list goes on. For something as basic as going to the bathroom.
So I guess some of the challenges you're outlining today, we've spent a lot of time, of course, looking at the needs of schools in growth areas. And we're looking at, over the last 6 years, capital investment in education has increased sevenfold. A lot of the issues you're talking about as well are not the big headline new schools, but new toilet facilities, need for covered basketball courts or covered outdoor areas in already established, developed areas. Do you see that there's a certain challenge at the moment in school infrastructure where some of these projects are potentially missing out because we're maybe too focused on the new schools?
Yes, and I understand the need to build new schools and new classrooms in growth areas, but yes, that means there is certainly still plenty of work in existing schools, many of which are very old. Fortunately, many of those very old buildings are very structurally sound because they were built that way, but nevertheless, there are certainly areas for upgrade, and toilets are certainly an example.
Any other questions from the committee members?
Just a general observation. When I was a councillor, the council used to have, with small projects, they used to have a list of preferred tenderers or people that they could immediately contact to resolve an issue. Is that something that could work with the schooling system?
The department already maintains a list of approved building organisations. That is useful, but then there's also process issues around that. If, for example, we as a P&C wish to fund a project at a school, we might get some ideas or some initial planning work from one of those vendors, but under the rules that means they can no longer participate any further in the project.
Right.
And there's a shortage of actually availability. I mean, there's labour issues currently in construction delays, but there's just the volume of projects that are required versus the number of builders and who can do it. I feel like there's a misalignment.
I think that's an issue. I understand from the departmental point of view they do not want to be caught with a project which has gone haywire and they need to pick up the pieces.
And we don't want that either.
No, that's fair enough. So obviously there needs to be standards and needs to be some at least vetting of the organisations doing the work, and so a pre-approved list is fine, but the process around it is still not adequate.
I just thought that could minimise the delay process rather than take 6 months or a year.
Yeah.
But it's also a funding issue. So for many of the schools, they actually have to fund, and the P&C is partially funded. So there's then the process where they will start fundraising, but then delays happen. And I understand COVID has, caused a challenge on many levels. But by the time they're getting closer to the actual build, the cost has gone up. So then P&Cs are back funding as well. And then there's budget constraints coming in from the school. So it's very difficult sometimes with the long timelines. And then you've got the issue where parents have already started to move out of the school who may be more passionate for that project.
Yep.
So you're project managing sometimes a 3 to 5 year process. And as a volunteer group who are a body of people who are moving through the school only because of their children, you then have the issue of, well, if that group move on and the project hasn't yet begun or halfway begun, what happens then? So it's difficult, I'd imagine, for the principals to also manage the project, knowing that they are relying on funding coming from a group of parents who are volunteering their time to raise funds, and they've got to commit, we've got to commit, assets have to commit. It's a three-party approach. But we don't have enough information also to really understand the process. It gets given out in bite-sized chunks.
I think it's reasonable for a parent involved in fundraising to expect that fundraising in the main is going to be there for the benefit of the children while they are at the school. But there's plenty of occasions when that is simply not the case, and our fundraising is effectively for the children of the parents who come after us.
And it still comes to question some of the basic things that P&Cs are funding actually should be. But it's what
but we can't wait.
No, we can't wait. So it's faster for us to fundraise
because we care about our children.
Could I ask you? I don't know if I'm just more aware of it lately, but I seem to see a lot of New South Wales government has funded this big signs on things. So whether it's in fact, there's a private school near me that has a big sign when they co-funded a piece of infrastructure for the school. To your knowledge, is that something that gets negotiated with schools for a certain, we will put this big sign up for a certain type of infrastructure improvement? Do you think there's...
As far as I know, if there is government funding, the government will, if there's an opportunity, ensure that it's noticed by the public.
And will that extend to things like changing taps?
No.
No,
Well, it
that's a
hasn't
bit-
in the schools that
that's
I'm aware
yeah,
of.
not that I'm aware of.
not-
No, that's a bit too small. But
A bit too small.
Mm.
There's a couple of big projects going on in my area, and I haven't yet heard of the fact that one of the requirements is that there needs to be some kind of acknowledgement that funding has come in from the government. I mean, sponsorship deals are happening with the PNCs to get their money in, that they'll put banners up of their local business community sponsors, but I've not seen that as a request yet from the government, that part of it should be that they display that they've donated money. There was a lot of funding coming out last year. I'm not sure what the impact will be moving forward after the election, though.
what I've seen is wherever there is construction fencing around a site, that will have government signage on it.
But it's not I don't know if that's then there's a permanent need for it to be acknowledged.
No,
nothing
but
permanent.
during the
Yeah.
period of time, which
I think-
obviously, if that was I guess if you were trying to demonstrate to the public that you were funding schools, then you might be more inclined to fund the ones that you have the signs up for than the smaller ones. Just
possibly. Again,
probably
my
can't comment on
observation
that.
is as soon as there's a construction fence, that's just a suitable canvas to put a sign on.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? If not, all that talk about toilets means the committee needs a toilet break.
That wasn't
for
the
our
No, I
long
tell
day
you
here.
what,
Oh well,
I-
this is just a function of nature. So we can have a 5-minute break now and resume with some of your members from Lennox Head. So thanks for your time
Very
today,
good.
Yvonne and Alan, and
Thank you.
we appreciate your contribution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Ms. Karen Kernahan, who are members of the Lennox Head Public School P&C. Thank you very much for your submissions and your time this morning. We just need to swear you in as committee witnesses. If you can state your name, position, and take either the oath or affirmation, please, starting with Danny, and then we'll go Ivy and Karen. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My name's Danny Rose from Tweed Shire Council, and I affirm that what I have to say today is the truth and the whole truth.
Thank you. Ivy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Ivy. I'm a parent of a student attending Lennox Head Public School and a member of the PNC. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. And Karen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Karen Kernahan. I'm a member of the Lennox Head Public School PNC. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. We've got your submissions to the inquiry, for which we thank you very much. But it's also available to you to make a short opening statement to this hearing, if you so wished.
Mr. Chair, is there a particular preference as to who begins?
Well, whoever jumps in first. Sounds like you, Ivy.
Okay, we jump in first?
Yeah, away you go.
Right, thank you. So I'll try to make this as brief. So thank you and good morning for the opportunity to address the committee today at the hearing. I would like to begin by stating that the infrastructure at Lennox Head Public School is not fit for purpose for contemporary learning and teaching. The project to upgrade the infrastructure began 6 years ago, and the delivery has since been delayed with the discovery of Aboriginal artefacts on site. In December last year, the Department of Education decided that the infrastructure upgrade will not proceed at the present site and that the school will be relocated. However, the location of the new site is unknown and the funding for the new school build is still unsecured. The future use of the school site after the school's relocation also remains undisclosed. Mr. Chair, so we acknowledge the ongoing efforts by the Department of Education to progress this infrastructure project, but there is expectation amongst some in our community that more should be done. Mr. Chair, to assist the committee with the the points that we're about to raise, I would like to table 3 documents, which I hope you have in front of you. We stress the importance for greater public transparency and disclosure of information, especially with project timeframes. As an example, may I please refer to the document stated Community Update April 2022. I hope that you have it in front of you.
Yes, we do, thanks. Yep, we do. It's being circulated now. It's headed, it's dated April 2022, yep.
Right, please let me know when you're ready before I proceed further.
Yes, please. Proceed.
Okay, thank you. So, if you could please refer to page 2, there is a diagram.
Yep.
That typically illustrates the planning, approval and delivery phases of the building of the new school. However, there are no indicative timeframes for each phase of the project. Now, this document actually was released last month, informing the community about the expression of interest to acquire land for the new school. However, timeframes associated with this process in its entirety are undisclosed. What we're asking for is greater transparency of information to help us improve our understanding of the progress of this project. So I hope that's one illustration there for you. The second point that we would like to raise is that parents and community should be identified as stakeholders in this infrastructure project, as it affects the education of our children and the livelihood of our community. We continue to live with decisions made regarding our only school without having the opportunity to provide substantial input to influence key decisions. May I please refer the committee to a second document titled Community Update May 2022. May I just double check that you have that in front of you?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So this was circulated last week actually to the community to advise the rezone of Lennox Head Public School and Southern Cross Public School area intakes. You can notice from the map, and I'm not sure how clear it is and printed out in front of you, that the southern half of Lennox Public School is now redesignated as the intake area for Southern Cross. The Department of Education implemented this rezone in order to stabilise the growth at Lennox Head Public School. This also gradually reduces the student population in years to come. This rezone also means that some families, carers and children living in our community who could previously walk or cycle to school will now have to commute without the advantage of the metropolitan public transport system. We conclude our statement by reiterating that we do not know when the new school will be built. Therefore, the present and ongoing needs of the school community must not be understated or neglected. It is our understanding that past decisions, especially on infrastructure maintenance and repairs, were short-term in focus because the school was to be upgraded. This short-term focus has to stop. May I please refer the committee to the photos that we have of the school. If I could point you to the photos on the first page where there is the portable classroom cluster and the image on the air purifiers. So upon the visit to school last week, it was demonstrated to me that air purifiers are actually being used in school, in some of the classrooms in the school right now due to mold buildup, poor ventilation, especially in the portable classrooms where windows can't be opened because they want to try and minimize the noise and the level of mosquitoes coming in. The portable classrooms in particular are very close to each other. On the second page, you can see that the only sheltered walkway that we have to the portable classroom cluster is currently inadequate, especially during heavy rain. There's also an image of the play space area that has been fenced off because of the artifacts that were discovered on site. There's also images there, I hope that you can see, of unsheltered eating areas and the staff room, which is currently in a portable and is not spaced adequately, I suppose, for the amount of staff that they have at the school. And the last image I would like to refer you to, please, is of our canteen and music room, which is also located in a portable itself and is a shared space. It's one of the oldest portables, I believe, on site. children and 44 administration, teachers, teaching and support staff must have access to well-maintained and safe infrastructure, equipment and materials in order to achieve a high standard of education. And this concludes our opening statement. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Danny, did you have an opening statement?
Yes, I do. And Mr. Chair, I just apologise that I messed up the affirmation earlier. I'm happy to go off the formal wording if the committee would like me to.
Yeah, maybe that helps. It's all very technical, but away you go.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Latham. I, Danny Rose, solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the committee today following Tweed Shire Council's submission to the committee. I'm the Manager Roads and Stormwater at Tweed Shire Council and I'm responsible for overseeing and implementing public infrastructure provision to the Tweed community, including the impacts of major developments on these networks alongside my colleagues in our water and wastewater units. Tweed's a high growth council and we've been critical to the state's planning strategy for the last 20 to 30 years and will continue to do so. We have large land releases with 15,000 lots imminent, residential lots. In our experience, this planning strategy is not equated to school infrastructure acquiring new greenfield public school sites. Instead, the plan appears to us to be to cater for this growth through upgrades and expansions of existing facilities. These existing school sites are typically constrained and located in or adjacent to residential areas, and they all have their existing traffic, parking and servicing problems. So while council's very, very supportive of new, larger public school facilities, we're often compromised when they're not required to meet the same infrastructure standards as other developments, including private schools. I've included several examples in our submission and I'm happy to discuss these with the committee today. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the committee members? Courtney Houssos.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. And I know we've only got a short session with you today, so can I say thanks very much for the additional information as well to Ivy and Karen. That's really helpful. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions around the changes to the local intake areas. What was the consultation that was undertaken with the PNC before this decision was taken?
So thank you, Mr. Soutos. We, the PNC, were invited to a special meeting the night before the rezone was announced. So we were informed of the meeting on Friday afternoon and the meeting occurred on the Monday evening from memory. And Tuesday the announcement was made.
So there was no actual, this is the decision we're pursuing, this is something that we're considering, we'd like to talk to parents and find out about what's the process that you're going through and...
Not that I'm aware of, Karen. No, not that I'm aware of, no.
So it wouldn't really be consultation, it'd be more about a briefing before a decision was announced.
Yes,
okay.
Pretty much, yes.
Okay, all right. Look, and can I just say thank you very much for your photographs. They've really helped us get an understanding of the difficulties that you're facing. Can I just ask you one question before I hand over to my colleagues, because we don't have a lot of time. The play space that the children have, roughly, do you consider that adequate? Do you think, has that been impacted by the demountable classrooms?
Absolutely. So at the moment, in one of the, so there's 2 playtimes, they actually send years 5 and 6 across to an oval, which is just next door, because there's not adequate space for the kids for all the kids to play in.
Wow. Okay. I have quite a few other questions, but I might just pass to my colleagues because we've only got about 10 minutes with these guys.
Yeah, and could I just ask for Danny, Ivy and Karen, it's open to members to put questions as supplementaries because we're trying to get through so many schools and issues in our limited time. Is that okay for you if Ms Soutos, for example, lodge those questions to you as supplementaries, then you have 21 days to provide an answer and it provides the committee with additional information. Other questions that we had,
Just
Musselman?
yes, thank you so much, Mr Mr. Chair. Just out of curiosity, in terms of the process of the expressions of interest, do you know when the expressions of interest will go out and how long for?
It was supposed to be released right about now, but
Haven't heard anything.
haven't heard anything. I tried to look for the documents online. I can't find it. I have placed a query with the school infrastructure this morning through email to find out where I can find them. I don't know, to be honest. No.
And so when you had those briefings, did they tell you how long the expressions of interest
So
will
for
go
the expression
for?
of interest of land, we were told it should come out soonish, within coming weeks, but no specific date was offered.
Other questions? We'll come. Yep,
from me.
Mr. Farlow.
Thank you very much. So there's been significant growth at the school, considering a small school. It started off at pretty much the same size that my kids' school is, at about 327, and of course gone to 463 in 5 years. So that's a big impact for a school like yours on a small site like it is. I notice in terms of the pictures you've distributed, and thank you very much for those, the play space area has been fenced off due to an artefact discovery, as you've outlined. Do you want to just outline what's the process there, and is that play space looking to come back into the school fold at all, or?
Not at all. Whatever the artefacts that were found there, they fenced off. That actually included the long jump kit. So when they hold athletics, they actually have to hold it on another site because they can't facilitate the actual long jump and stuff there. But that will be whatever is there. You're not allowed to walk on it. You're not allowed to go into that area. So it's completely fenced off. And if anything happens in the area, for example, there was a storm late last year and a tree fell over. That tree then had to be fenced off because they needed people to come in and check and make sure that nothing had been disturbed. So that was more play space that the kids then can't play in.
And I take it that's an Aboriginal artefact that's been found there, is it? Yep. And
yes.
So does that have an impact in terms of future options for the school and for site planning as well? And potentially, I guess, to the May 21 advice you provided us, the location for a new school in Lennox Head.
Yeah, because there's an AHIP in place, but you can't actually dig on site. There's certain things that they can do, and the Department of Education, over the years, they did try everything and put a fair few options available, but each of them kind of got knocked back. So that's when they decided that they needed to find a new site.
Yeah.
Even going up, so there's existing buildings there, and they were going to go up just on the existing buildings on the footprint that was already there. But yeah, it got knocked back and said that couldn't do that either. So there's nothing that you can do at the school. We get a bit worried because if a pipe bursts or something like that, apparently we can't dig to fix it. So it's getting to the point where it's like nearly unusable kind of thing. So
I can understand your frustration. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Back to Ms. Usos for the.
Okay.
I'm good.
Can I just ask to Mr. Rose, thanks very much for your time and your submission. I just wanted to ask you about the information that you provide to School Infrastructure New South Wales. Do you engage with them directly to provide your population projections, or does that happen at a more centralised level?
If we, I believe it happens at the state level in terms of council participates in planning strategies like the Far North Coast strategy and our city centre strategies, which incorporates Tweed Heads as the major city on the north coast, and school infrastructure, health infrastructure, and other stakeholders are involved in those discussions. So indirectly, they do receive that information with input from council, but I believe that's primarily held and sourced and researched by the state.
So there's no, for example, local building approvals information or any kind of changes that you would then feed into School Infrastructure New South Wales?
We would if we were requested, but I'm not aware of any request for that that nature. They may be handled by our strategic planners. I sit within the engineering area, but I understand that their planning is based on information that's provided by the state rather than council.
Okay. Mr. Rose, I just wanted to ask, we've done a number of site visits, and one of the issues that's come up frequently is that around traffic and congestion, and I note that you talked about that in your submission as well, that even the provision of things like kiss and ride facilities that try and facilitate easier drop-offs can actually create much bigger traffic headaches. Now, that's in the outer suburbs of Sydney, but some of the populations that we're looking at on the north coast are similar to, on the far north coast are similar to that. What is the kind of engagement that you have at a localised planning level with School Infrastructure New South Wales when they're planning a school? Do they come and talk to you about how traffic's going to work? What the kind of, I think the term they use is enabling infrastructure, how that's going to work? Do those conversations happen?
They do, and in our experience, and as I said in my opening, we're generally dealing with retrofits and upgrades to existing schools. So often we are approached and we try to table what the existing issues around particular schools are. We've got lots of examples in Wollumbar and Kingscliff and Tweed Head south of on foot at the moment. They are heard, but our experience is that they rarely result in many physical changes to the planning for those schools, because the schools are constrained by, physically constrained by site and other limitations. We don't have cultural heritage impacts that I'm aware of, but other things like flora and fauna do come up. So when we try to impose our standards on things like parking, traffic pick-up and drop-offs, public transport infrastructure, generally we get what we're given because that's all that will fit on the site or adjacent to the site. There are systems in place for upgrades external to school sites, and often their traffic assessments are based on assumed increases in children and staff walking, cycling and catching buses to schools. However, they're for council to apply for grants to fill in those missing links or upgrade infrastructure, which shifts that resource and administration burden on the council rather than being provided up front with the school upgrades.
Thanks very much, Mr. Rose. I might just go back to Ms. Yappin and Ms. Kernahan. Can you just explain? So, I mean, there are some pretty significant issues in terms of the future of the school, the way that the current site's being used, the location of this new school. How would you characterise the interactions with School Infrastructure New South Wales and the local school community and parents in actually engaging in a conversation about addressing these issues?
Okay, so I've actually been involved with it from the get-go, which I think is about 6 years. Now, for the first couple of meetings, you literally had to re-explain yourself because it was different people at those meetings. You didn't have a continuity of people there. In the last couple of meetings, there is 2 blokes now that have actually stayed with the development with it, even though that's not their role anymore, because they understood our frustration of people don't understand. If you haven't been to the site, you can't get a grasp of what we're actually dealing with. They half tell you what's happening. They say that there's going to be community consultation and parent consultation. Even sometimes when you put forward your idea, they don't listen to you. At the very first meeting, they kind of said that Lennox was a retirement village. Oh no, families aren't living here. And look what happened, the school blew out that much. Because we tried to tell them that the figure that they gave us that we were going to be was literally what we were at that point in time, the 5 years previous. I feel, and I was at the school for 17 years with my children, that they didn't listen to us. And even now with this new school, it's never going to happen, but you literally need a public high school in Lennox Head the way that the population and the growth is going. Not that that's going to happen. I honestly don't know where they're going to find a site to put the new school.
I haven't been involved with the infrastructure project for as long as Karen has, but for the limited interaction that I've had so far, I think personally there could be more in terms of consultation with the community and with parents. Right now, I believe there's a lot of we are recipients of information as opposed to being engaged with for an opinion and input.
And do you find that there are local, the people that you are dealing with based locally on the Far North Coast, or are they primarily from Sydney?
Well, from the meeting we had about the rezone last week, there was a representative from school infrastructure whom I understand, if memory serves me correctly, had relocated and is now living locally. And the representatives from the Department of Education are from this Far North Coast area. But that was from the meeting last week.
Yeah, the infrastructure ones, the majority of them, besides Peter Campbell, which is our head guy here, that they were all from Sydney. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And obviously that makes life a bit more difficult to try and explain, these kind of generalisations that are made that Lennox is a retirement community rather than...
And even like in Sydney, you've got your different suburbs and you literally step across a line in your different suburbs. That's not what we're like. Like our next town is 10 minutes away. Or you've got, the other town is 20 minutes away. It's not like the next school is just next door.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, can I just say thank you so much for your time and for your highlighting the huge issues that you're facing. It's certainly been very informative for us as a committee today, so thanks very much.
Yeah, and Catherine Cusack, did you have any points? Because Catherine's North Coast MLC.
Oh. Hi.
You live in Lennox Head. What's the scene there?
Yeah, I engage on this. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, it's right on time for this session, and thanks Danny, Ivy and Karen for your input, which has been fantastic. And by the sound of it, Catherine will be our agent on the ground to gather more information with the visit to the school, because it's obviously very hard to visit every region of the state with our limited resources, but we thank you for your participation today and all the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Latham. Thank you, committee.
Okay, how are we going with Allagadullah? They're coming on now? Great. Both Melanie and Kevin?
Yes, that's correct. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me? It's Kevin from Allagadullah.
Yeah, g'day Kevin, we can hear you, and Melanie? Thanks
Mel, sorry, couldn't make it tonight.
No. Okay, so...
No, I'm here, but I managed to just scrape it in.
Okay, Melanie is there.
Oh, you are there, Mel?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, fantastic. Well, we'll start with you, Kevin, to swear yourself in, your name, position and the oath or the affirmation, and thank you for your participation.
Yeah, my name is Kevin Bartolo. I'm the admin of the Allagadullah Schools Area Expansion Group, member of the PNC of Allagadullah High School. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thanks, Kevin. It might help if you could turn your video on.
I don't know, it doesn't want to work.
No? Okay,
I
that
tested
happens.
it with another
Yep.
program before and it did, but it won't
Right.
work with this one.
Okay, thank you. Melanie, to swear yourself in.
Yes, sure. My name's Melanie Doyle. I'm a member of the PNC at Allagadullah High School. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. And Kevin or Melanie, it's available to you to make a short opening statement. We've got your submissions, of course, and thank you for that. But if you wanted to make a short opening statement, you can do so, or we can go straight to questions.
Mel, you can go first.
Yes, so in regards to this, I heard that there was a recommendation possible and then an address. So I'll just stick with a recommendation because I think the address will be just over 2 minutes. So basically our recommendation would be for School Infrastructure New South Wales to seek opportunities with underutilised assets. So in our case, we have an underutilised school, a vacant school, and to create cost-effective educational facilities and ensure that funding is allocated proportionally and equitably. We've just found a recent scenario where locally $40 million of funding has been allocated to the benefit of 40 students, which is fantastic. However, we were seeking, I'm not sure if you know the background of our scenario, we were seeking $10 to $15 million to basically utilise this existing walk-in school fit for purpose, so a lot less, and it would have been to the benefit of 500 local students. So I suppose that's our concern with our recent experience with School of Construction New South Wales.
Thank you. Kevin?
Yeah, just to add to that, basically, is that the community, especially the members of the group that I represent, were just a little bit annoyed with the process that we were cut out of, and the lack of wanting to talk with the community at meetings that we invited members of the education department and local members of Parliament, and we just needed to see that they were willing to work with us on this situation. Unfortunately, every avenue that we tried to take up with that was declined, and it's just a bit sad that was what had happened.
Thank you. Questions from committee members? Courtney Houssos?
Thanks very much, Kevin and Mel, for your time today. I think it might just be useful for the committee if you just explain a little bit more about the details of the broader issue. What we're seeing here is that we've seen two new schools, one a bit further south, and we've already talked about the Warragee Nowra school this morning, and the concerns about that being promised and not necessarily needed. But at the same time, around Milton and Ulladulla, we've got a site, we need to see the school progress, but it's not progressing. Is that right?
Yeah, I think, sorry, Kevin, are you happy for me to answer that?
Yeah, go for it.
I think the biggest concern we have is school infrastructure basically is not looking at current statistics of growth in this area, and as we all know, especially post-COVID, there's been a large push regionally. This has exacerbated already overcapacity schools. So our local primary schools are over capacity by 30%, our high schools over capacity by about 10%, and it's getting worse. We've only got one high school which reaches basically from Nowra all the way to Batemans Bay, so it's a large span, so a very popular growing area. And we've got this great opportunity where the Anglican school was purchased by New South Wales state government for a cheap price of $4 million, an absolute bargain. And it facilitated 500 students, K-12, and it's an absolutely fantastic facility, private school facility. Now, we were hoping when that was purchased as a community that we would look at it as an education precinct and how that would benefit all the three schools who are over capacity, and even be open-minded to other opportunities on an educational level. However, that consultation to discuss all the options didn't take place, and instead they've moved forward and demolished a component of that school to make way for the 40 students at Budawang, and the remainder of the school remains still fit for purpose, but is sitting there for the last 3 years wasting away, and it's actually getting quite depleted now. It's sad to see when, you know, the government has this fantastic facility at its disposal, but not really consulting with the community on how that facility can be utilised.
Kevin, did you want to add to that one?
Yeah, the great concern that we have, and it was also raised by Transport New South Wales when they were approving and going through with the approval of Budawang School, that the rest of the site isn't being consulted or looked at in this whole site as a proposal. So when later on, if the school goes ahead, there is going to be a great possibility that there's not going to be enough access for buses, parents and emergency vehicles to access the rear of the site where the majority of the students are going to be. Transport New South Wales have already stated that there is not enough room on the existing Matron Porter Drive part of the road, due to residential area around it and commercial properties. It only housed 1 to 2 buses as it is, where if you've got about 500 students, you could be looking at 5 or more buses at any one time, plus a high number of parents that come and pick their kids up and drop them off.
And that's why we wanted a holistic approach by School Infrastructure New South Wales. When we were granted that $4 million property, it was an opportunity to look at how we can benefit the community as a whole, not just benefit and take away a small component of that land. So the now is concern is the reason they moved those students across there is because they were leasing another premises that they wanted to get out of. So that was their immediate concern. So I understand that, and that was a move they chose to make to benefit and get out of that lease. But in the process of effectively let the majority of the site go derelict and not be made available to the wider community when it's quite clear that this is a growing need for this space.
Just one other thing on that, it wasn't the only site that was available for the use of making a new school for Butterwang. There is a site on Garside Road that the Department of Education tried to sell off only last year, and the local community fought for that. That site would actually house 2 of the new buildings that basically 2 of the new Butterwang schools that they're actually putting onto the SAS site. So it would allow for 100% expansion of the new school that they're building, which we have been told by Butterwang will be at 100% capacity the day that they open. And there's going to be, they don't even know how many people are waiting there's no waiting list for it because they don't even bother, because they haven't got a premises that will house enough of the students that need to go to that school.
And so there's been a number of ideas thrown around the community, and some of them being that the amount of support classes that we're seeing in the local primary schools and high schools have expanded. So the high schools got 12 and the primary schools have 2 to 3 each. So, some of the children in here in those support classes are quite handicapped because they've had no other avenue of places to go, and some of them have severe learning disabilities. So what we're suggesting, and I'm not suggesting this is an option, but there's so many different needs we could utilise that space for, which would alleviate pressure on the local schools. But we're just not getting a hearing from the School Infrastructure New South Wales. And I know we are a little bit different because in most circumstances when people are approaching them, they are looking for a brand new field or major renovation. In this case, we have a perfectly good walking school right now. Put your pencil on the table and get going. Virtually, we just need a fit out. So we less than $10 million they said it was going to cost them. But instead, $40 million has been directed to this new school and nothing to the greater community. And we just feel that the School Infrastructure New South Wales is underutilising its assets. And it's disproportionately allocated funds, and it's not equitable in our community.
And what about the impact on students who are attending at the existing primary school and high school? I think one of your submissions talked about how they're being really crammed in, that they don't have enough play space, that they don't have enough space to move around. Can you just talk about the impact on the students?
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry,
Okay.
Kev, sorry.
I was just basically going to say that the numbers say a lot. In 2017, the Aladala High School was at 1,208 students, and its maximum capacity set by the DOE is 1,220. Aladala Primary School, the same year, 735 students, where the maximum capacity is 509. And Milton Public Schools, 681 students with a 555 capacity set by the DOE. That was in 2017, but the numbers have only increased since then.
I think the biggest thing with the lack of space is, with the high school, for example, when the year 7s start, they're allocated a very small area, and there's not enough seating, and they have to sit on the concrete, and there's a very limited area they can play in the Nashville area. I mean, I know rural schools are better off than a lot of the city schools because of the space factor. So we are lucky in some regards that we have ovals, but we don't have, the normal size ovals of space that used to be available to students because we're constantly having to put demountables on. I think we're up to 20 demountables. And I know other schools are also in the same situation. But what annoys us the most is there's a perfectly good school sitting there waiting to be utilised, and that's our argument. Why? I understand if there's no funding and there's nothing there in the first place, but we have a school available to us. Why aren't we using it?
Well, you mentioned Warradee before. Warradee's got less of a population growth than what Ulladulla, Milton area has. It was in the latest statistics.
And you talked about how the planning projections have just been so wrong, that the planning projections from school infrastructure and from planning have just been so wrong, that it is a massive area of growth, that corridor around Milton Ulladulla. And I know that this is an issue that's been raised with me by our colleague in here, Justin Field, and I know that it's something that he's right across, but the official government planning is just not reflecting what's going on the ground. Is that correct?
100%. If you look at their planning statistics, they've basically got negative to flat growth for our area for the schools. Now, I don't think you have to be a rocket science to work out that by face value that's incorrect. You'll probably find other schools across the state are suffering the same fate. They can't run their statistics off the old census information from 5 years ago. They have to work out. If you go and look at, we've got about 10 housing developments going through at the moment. Real estate's, like everywhere, is going through the roof. There's so many new faces and families in town. I've been here for over 20 years and I don't know half the people in the streets anymore. It's a completely dynamic, diverse, young group of people that are coming into town now. It's not the old retirement like it traditionally has, and our projection forecasts supplied by school infrastructure are way out of kilter with reality.
Thanks very much.
Other questions from the committee members? No? Catherine Cusack, did you have any questions? If not, we have to conclude at that point and thank the representatives from Ulladulla. Catherine, yep.
No. I just wanted to apologise. I was just away from the mute.
Oh, okay.
I don't have any questions.
That's okay. Yep, the WebEx can be a bit confusing. Thank you to Melanie and Kevin for your presentation, and any further information you wanted to provide to the committee would be gratefully received. Thank you.
We're happy to take supplementary questions if that comes about.
Yep, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
The formality of swearing you in. So starting with Katie, if you could state your name, position and take the oath or affirmation. And we also thank you for your submission and time today, which is very much appreciated. Katie?
My name is Katie Janet Ferguson. I'm the P&C President of Gilliston Public School. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare an affirmation that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Todd?
My name is Todd Sellers, and I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
And Simon?
My name's Simon. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
And Sarah?
I'm Sarah Bird. I'm a parent of the school. Solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. And it's available to you to make a short statement if any of you wanted to be sort of the spokesperson to make a short statement, and then we ask questions as committee members. Katie?
Sure. Do you mind if we all have a bit of a go, or is just one of us? Yep. Okay. So I wrote this last night, so I was a bit of a drummer. Hello, my name is Katie, P&C President and mother of 3 children at Gilliston Public. I have 2 daughters and a son at the school, Year 6, Year 4 and kindergarten. My son lives to play soccer. It's everything to him. He persists at school every single day, chasing the ball up and down the steep hill that they call an oval, or twisting his ankle on the unlevel playing field. This is not good enough. I've been talking with the community for some time now, and in that time I've had countless parents tell me they'd rather be in debt due to private school fees than send their children to Gilliston. This isn't good enough. I recently met with a mother that actually wanted to send her daughter to Gilliston, but as her daughter has a hearing disability, the acoustics in the demountable classrooms are too much for her to bear. She is now sending her daughter to a Catholic school over 20 kilometres away because she couldn't get an out-of-zone placement at a more local out-of-zone school. This isn't good enough. Just this week, I had a concerned mother message me. Her daughter has cerebral palsy and desperately wants her daughter to go to the same school as her neighbours. After having a test run with a physio and OT, they found the stairs to the demountable hall/canteen to be far too steep and the playing areas to be far too unlevel. This isn't good enough. On Friday, I attended a Mother's Day morning tea, our first since COVID. On the tour to my children's classrooms, I passed one of the 3 demountable toilets. The smell was real. I now understand why my daughter and so many of her school friends wait until they get home to use the facilities, causing health problems. This isn't good enough. I dream of the day my children can put on a school performance, but with a school hall with no stage that can barely fit half the school in it, let alone the parents and carers, this isn't going to happen. This isn't good enough. I could keep talking, but it's time to sign the cheque. We've been left behind for far too long. Give us the school our children deserve. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Todd?
Thank you for the opportunity, folks, and thank you, Chair. My name is Todd Sellers. I'm a resident of Gilliston Heights, Maitland born and bred. I've been at Gilliston Heights for 20 years. I have 7 children, 6 of whom either attend or have attended Gilliston Public Schools. I've been associated with the school for 20 years. My oldest daughter was a school captain. They're very proud. 2 sons have been house captains. Very proud. One of my sons, unfortunately, can't attend. He suffers from or has a condition referred to as autism, which you may be familiar with. He's level 3, non-verbal, has a global development delay and a bunch of other things going on. I can't send him to this school, even though his brothers and sisters have attended or are attending. He's 9 years old. He attends Aspect. I pay $25,000 a year for that. This school has 12 classrooms, 10 of which are demountables. I have some documents I'd like to table. Is now the right time for that?
Yeah, sure.
There's 4 documents, so I've just labelled them TS, being my initials 1, 2, 3, 4. For convenience. Thank you. As you receive these documents, you'll see that number 1 is simply a letter of support from our Mayor, Philip Penfold. He was elected just recently, but he's been quite a strong advocate for the school for some time.
Is that Cessnock or Maitland Council?
Maitland Council. Yeah, so that's Patterson electorate state based. Yeah. The letter's well written and very poignant in regards to 4 key points. The next submission you'll see there is actually 2 maps. And they'll give you a very good understanding of exactly what we're talking about for this school in regards to geography. You'll see on the yellow on the second one when it arrives is original Gilliston Heights. This is Gillow as it was. We call it Gillow just colloquially as a suburb. Okay. This is Gillow as it was 20 years ago. It was a small little area. I came back from Sydney. I've been in Sydney for 10 years and I wanted to find a local area, back in my own hometown, where it had that country feel but had all the facilities of the city. This is 5 minutes from Maitland, a very significant city in rural New South Wales or residential New South Wales. Country Aspect had 64 children at this school when my children first started attending there in 2001. My 3 children made up the extras they need for the next teacher to arrive. It was very exciting. And we got a demountable not long after that. That was very exciting back then too. Today we actually hold our breath when we get a demountable because it's so cluttered. But you'll see on that map, about 80% of the residential area there highlighted is now new areas. the growth has been exponential. We're talking about Gilliston Heights, the fastest growing, hold me wrong if I am wrong, but I don't believe I am, the fastest growing suburb of Maitland, which is the fastest growing city in New South Wales. And here we are with this school, one of 4 primary schools in the area with demountables, 10 out of 12. In which you turn to page 3, you'll see on that map that there's 12 highlighted buildings. If you're looking at page 3, you'll see 10 of those are highlighted in yellow. And you'll see there's 2 that are highlighted in orange, if you can refer to page 3. The 2 highlighted in orange are the permanent buildings. They're the kindergarten rooms. They were built about 5 years ago. All those yellow ones are all our demountables throughout the school. They're the 12 classrooms we have. And if you turn to the last page, which is submission 4, you'll see there's 3 photos there. The top one's Maitland Public School, a very proud public school of New South Wales. My father attended there, so did my brother. Then we have Rutherford Public School. It's one that drew a lot of attention about 10 years ago, and the state government did the right thing. They put a heck of a lot of attention to it. They threw the funds in there and they developed that school. And it is state of the art. It is a fantastic development. And at the bottom you'll see Gillow. 1858 is when this school was established, folks. It's not a new school. It doesn't have sewerage, town sewerage. It doesn't have fencing that's safe. It's chicken wire fencing to your waist. Every other school in the area has black bars, 1800 or 2100 high. This school doesn't. I've taken up more than I should in time. I do impress upon you to have a look at those documents I submitted. And I do impress upon you to understand that we see as a crisis in education for infrastructure at this school. My family, believe it or not, although we've been here since first settlement, was also multicultural. My children are German, Irish, English, Welsh, Chinese, Filipino, Spanish by heritage. We're Australians. My wife came from a third world country, and she is in despair with the quality of our education system by way of the infrastructure at this school. She wants us to move our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Simon?
I've got 3 children at school. I don't know where to start. Todd covered so many things. I've never seen a school like it. I just stopped a child jumping the fence in front of traffic the other week. It's terrible. I'm sorry.
That's okay, Simon. It sounds a desperately bad situation. Sarah?
I think most points have been covered, but the problems that we feel really need to be addressed is the fencing, the demountable buildings that are ever increasing in a very increasing population. There's a lot more land that's been subdivided to building. The sewerage, there's houses across the road. I don't understand why the school can't be connected. It can't be that hard. The traffic, the approach to the school is horrendous. The main gate is on a dead end street, so all the traffic that goes in has to come out. It's a narrow street that becomes a single lane, and it's just chaos, and it's really unsafe for the children.
Thank you very much. Can I just say that our committee has had limited time and resources for visiting schools. We've visited schools in northwest Sydney and southwest Sydney. We saw one at Schofields, which sounds a similar but far more successful situation than your Gilliston school, because when a country school is overwhelmed by new urban type population growth, it's obviously very hard to adapt, but the department at Schofields has done a pretty good job there. But your situation sounds particularly appalling. I'm in Newcastle the first couple of days of June, and I will undertake to come and visit your school as chair of the committee, because obviously seeing these things is a lot more authentic and informative, notwithstanding your excellent evidence, because you've alerted us to something that sounds like it just should not be happening in a civilised society, shouldn't be happening in a state with plenty of resources like New South Wales. So it's very important, I think, for committee members to see these things. Catherine Cusack earlier on said she'd undertake to visit Lennox Heads because she's in the north coast of New South Wales. So I will visit, and what you're saying today will be supplemented by a practical inspection. by me at least, and we need to get to the bottom of why you've been so badly overlooked. You know, no sewerage, chicken wire fence, 10 demountables out of 12 classrooms is simply unacceptable. So,
And Mark, I must just say, this is 3 points of about 8 or 10, which I could put at a similar level. They're just the primary ones. That's the key essence that we want to put
and it sounds like it's going to get worse with further population growth.
There's
So
300 students, approximately 55, 70 in the area that are school age, primary school aged, and nearly half of them attend other schools. They just won't send the kids there.
yeah, well, thanks for being here today. I will come and inspect the school early in June, and we're now open to questions from other committee members. Courtney, who's
Thanks very much. And can I just thank all of our witnesses for your time today, for your submissions, and for your ongoing advocacy. I know that there's been I've been briefed extensively by our local Labor MP, Jenny Aitchison, who I know has worked closely with you to get some improvements to the school. But there's still a very long way to go. So I think we really appreciate you coming here and sharing your stories. As difficult as they can be, it's incredibly important for the work of this committee that we can be informed by them. I wanted to talk about, all of you have alluded to the fact that it's the overcrowding at the school, the fact that the demountables, whilst maybe first welcomed because there was an expansion of the school, and that's a good indicator, we're seeing huge housing developments around the area. Everyone's talked about that this morning. Yep. People who are moving here for new opportunities for their families, looking to put down roots and looking to the local school to be really the centrepiece for that. Yep. And what is the impact on children in terms of their learning and their development at attending at Gilliston Heights at the moment as it currently is?
Well, as a mum of very active children, My son plays rep soccer in the Maitland area. You can't get a ball away from this kid's feet, and to have to kick that ball up the hill, his fitness is incredible. He runs up and down that hill all day, but just a flat playing surface, actual places for the kids to train for their PWSA. They've currently just started their PWSA. My son stepped up into the PWSA soccer team. They won 10-1. Like I said, their fitness was amazing. And my daughter played on Friday netball. They won 22-0. For kids that have lack of training facilities, they're very resilient, very resilient children. As for inside the classroom, I can't speak highly of the teachers and staff at the school. They work really, really, really hard. In saying that, we do have a very hard time holding on to teachers. They will move on. They come to the school because it's a job and it's a paycheck, but after a certain period of time, they'll start applying for other schools with other opportunities. That Gilliston doesn't get the opportunities. We've only just started sending our kids to the PWSAs. We've maybe had one or two my eldest daughter's in year 6, 1 or 2 in that whole time. So, which is devastating. And we don't even have, my kids they've never done a talent show or put on a play, and nothing like that.
There's no facilities.
We don't have the facilities.
yeah, is there any word from the Education Department or the principal of new permanent buildings in the pipeline?
None.
We've asked. I've actually rung the relevant minister's office myself several times, and I've tried to keep this as non-partisan as I can. I've attended different forums on this, and I've invited people from Liberal and Labor and Independents for the purpose of keeping this as non-partisan as I can. But for the life of me, I can't get a response from the current minister. I don't give a damn what colour she is by way of electoral party. The current minister, I can't get a response from, and I can't get a response from the actual department.
Right, so
Now,
nothing's come to you, Katie?
I have had response from Minister Mitchell's people, and the only positive I got out of that letter was that they were going to look into connecting the town to the septic, to the town
to the
sewer.
sewerage, right.
That was it. They had put down a new surface under our COLA. So they basically painted the concrete, and I was meant to give them a high five for that. That's unacceptable. That's all we got in the last Christmas break.
Mm-hmm.
Was that?
Okay.
But it's true, you had to fight to get was it the toilets that weren't concreted? That was the first battle?
So that was a little bit before my time
Yeah.
coming in. The previous PNC did do that, but yeah, we did have a a brick building that had an unsealed floor, but now we have been replaced with 3 demountables. Look, I can go to a music festival and go to the toilet in better conditions than my children do. It's outrageous.
Yes, absolutely.
If I could just ask you a question more just succinctly, if I could.
Yeah, of course.
Educational impacts currently, the attrition that Katie just spoke about is the key point.
Yeah.
My children, it's not unusual from year to year to have 3 or more teachers. It's challenging, and I feel for the teachers. They do give quality education, but it's not an environment for them to actually see a career. Quite often you have teachers who stayed at a school for generations almost, where the children will come from the children that went before. Very few here. The teachers just don't hang around. We have children there that have got their parents and grandparents that have attended previously, and that's part of the reason why we still have such a cohort of students there, that and the increase in the residential area. But it's the educational impact from that attrition of teachers is my main concern.
But it's that the government isn't keeping the facilities up to a standard that's going to the community's keeping up their part of the end of the bargain. The teachers are doing their best, but the facilities themselves are just absolutely appalling.
I've got friends that have their kids at Rutherford. Recently just moved from Gilliston to Rutherford, and she is absolutely astounded with the amount of things that they get over there that their kids didn't get at Gilliston. She said to me the other day that they were getting music lessons with actual instruments. We don't have that. Like we once had a van that came in the afternoon and they could go into the van and play an instrument or two, but I do believe that was at payment. We had to pay for that. We don't...
Just to paint a picture of this, a lot of schools have a hall. What we have is 3 or 4 demountables joined together, and you can fit approximately half the school in there at one time.
And the canteen's connected to it.
And the canteen's at one end. There's no air conditioning or window for the canteen. So you can imagine those poor ladies and they're volunteering their time, hot environments at the time where they're doing things. It's very uncomfortable. The children line up. It's supposed to be a hall. They have to do 2 sessions for anything because they can't fit the students in there.
They have put a air conditioner in the canteen, but there's no air conditioning in the hall at all. So on a 45-degree day, when they're doing a assembly, it's no longer in the hall. It is out in the cola.
And the cola is a covered area with a concrete floor outside.
Yeah. Have you got any estimate on how many local families are going out of area to get away from this?
Approximately half.
School, about half. You reckon half are going up to
We know that from statistics in regards to the
schools.
The children that attend. So statistics I've been given is in the area of Gilliston Heights, Clifley, that intake area around Gilliston Public School, there's approximately, actually I've got the numbers written down. So just one moment. Yeah.
So it's 50% and rising.
Yeah, well, the amount of clearing that they're doing currently, and some of it being on old mine subsidence. I live in Old Gilliston myself, which is in that yellow field, the original. And as you look down our hill, that my house is 110 years old, and it's an original miner's cottage, and it used to overlook where they worked, so you could see the mine. They've pumped it so they can clear it and put houses on it. And over near the baseball field, it's an even bigger area, and I believe there could be thousands of houses over there. It's huge.
It's 570 students in the Gilliston Heights, Clifley area that are of primary school age, 570.
And we have
approximately 300, 294 attend Gilliston Public
as
School.
of last week.
So you can see from those statistics, approximately half attend the school, half the parents you would therefore judge send their children elsewhere.
You'll find at the beginning of every year we have the start of term 1 will have a very high, quite a high number of enrolments, but as you get into week 1 or 2, those numbers will dramatically drop because those parents will double enroll their children using Gilliston as their last stop, and they will send their kids elsewhere.
And how long has the new suburbs, the new estates, the population growth been known about? I mean,
Sure. So 2001 when I moved there, as I said, there were 64 children in the school. I can tell you that 2014-15 through to now, there's been a 76% increase in the students.
When you moved there in 2000, was were there real estate signs around, or you knew
you couldn't buy a house?
You couldn't buy a house. But when did you first find out that You know, this area was slated for residential development.
2006.
2006. These issues have been known for over 15 years.
Yes. Yes. We're excited
Other
to push our
questions?
house prices up. We thought that'd be great, but we also assumed that the school would keep pace. We did.
Very frustrating for you, I'm sure. Terrible. Any other questions? Where's Fang?
So, Northview Street, I'm just looking at the top down. That
Sure.
is a new road.
Subdevelopment. Yep.
It's a residential road that's quite narrow as well, to point out.
Yep.
So that's, apologies, yes, I'm usually the microphone Nazi. So I'm just looking at the aerial view. So Northview Street is a new road that's,
Yes.
I guess,
Yep.
been built to the south of the school.
Yes.
The boundaries of the school beforehand, did the road impact the school boundary at all, or was it built on land
No,
that
it
was
did
outside
not.
of the...
The land that the street was built on was other land outside of the school boundary. The school boundaries remained the same, except we purchased a portion of land next to us.
Yeah.
I guess it would be to the east of the school, which you can see on there on the map.
Yep.
Oh, it's the sloping football field I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah, radio.
Yeah, which is approximately a 1.5 metre drop across it for the children to play on. That's the main sloping field that we're talking about.
Yep.
That's the only area they have to play a kick a ball.
Okay, and on the eastern side, it sort
Mhm.
of comes to a point near looks like a small water feature, like that's all the schools. That's the ground where the school. Okay.
Sure. Now, just to point out also, they actually changed the entrance and the entry facilities for the school. So on the opposite corner, if I was to phrase it as the northwest corner, there's the original building. It's a lovely building, and it's the original one with the original school bell from 1858 and the like. Unfortunately, in my view, they changed the school entrance to the other end because the road traffic plan there is non-existent. There's no pedestrian crossings. There's no support for children getting across the roads. There's nowhere for the buses to park. There's nowhere for the parents to turn their vehicles on Northcote Street. You'll see there, if you're there of a morning or there with a camera, parents doing three-point turns all up and down there in a very narrow residential street. Folks, when you've got a car parked each side, up on the gutter, you've got just enough room for one car to come down the centre. So cars are banked up at one end whilst other cars come through. Then the reverse happens continually, at drop-off and pick-up. It's a very dangerous... If this committee isn't successful in dealing with this, someone's going to get hurt.
Absolutely.
Well, I think more importantly, the department and the minister have got to deal with it. We're obviously going to be very
No, you're right.
sympathetic, and your situation
You're
sounds
right.
dreadful.
I appreciate
But
any assistance your
yeah,
committee
like
can
if
give.
we could fix it, obviously we would, but we're here to make recommendations to the government, and finding out about your circumstances is obviously going to be a very important part of our report.
We're quite passionate on this. The risk in our mind is quite high, not only for the ongoing health of our children, but also for the immediate safety of our children with the traffic situation.
Yep. Can I just add, Chair,
Sure.
that I am appalled what we've just heard, and having to listen to your case and the status of the school, and the plea that you've been putting out there with very little response. So hopefully, I'm not part of this committee, but hopefully I'll be speaking on it and making the point as well, stressing the point that this is unacceptable. It's going to go on.
Mr. Latham, I do have some photographs that I've provided today. I'd like to table them
Oh,
if
thank
I can.
you. Thank you.
You'll find a picture of the current, one of the current, the newer toilet demountables.
The mountable toilet, folks. There's three of them.
There's a couple of photos also of the slope that the children have to play on, and if you'll see the canteen, you'll see how many pillars are underneath that to keep that level. You'll see exactly how unlevel that playing field is. The corner of Northview and Ryan's Road, and just obviously just all the demountables. The photo with the fence is actually the point where the truck comes to pump the septic, which the children smell when that happens. Yeah. It's not on. Also, there is I was recently given this attachment for a Millthorpe public school from a parent, and she was concerned that this school had not long been upgraded and now it's getting another one.
How far away is Millthorpe?
It's out at near between Orange and
Western New South Wales.
Western
Oh,
New
right,
South
okay.
Wales.
Long way from you.
Also, I just happened to be doing some Googling and come across this lovely piece of paper here, which it's the BGAS for non-government schools for 2020 and 2021 projects. There is a massive list of schools that the government is funding, be it Catholic or private, and how much they're giving them. If you turn to the very last page of that, you'll find AIS, Gilliston Heights Learning Community, Gilliston Heights. Now, on first sight, I got very excited because I didn't realise that AIS meant it was private. And then I seen that they gave somebody else $5 million to build another school that's not public funded. It breaks my heart. I shouldn't, like, I'm a cleaner. I can't afford to pay thousands and thousands of dollars a year for my children to go. And we should all have the same opportunity. I just don't understand. And apparently, I'm told that the department had a deposit on land in Gilliston to move the school to a flatter surface area and build a new school. They let that deposit lapse, and it was quickly picked up by the Catholic diocese. So we missed out on a new school because of their lacking again.
Two statistics, if I may, just quickly, that may be of assistance to you. There was $58,000, approximately $58,000 in capital spent at the school the last period. Actually, I don't have the timeline this was for. Do you know, Katie?
8 years.
The last 8 years, $58,000 in capital. $705,000 in repairs and maintenance.
Doesn't
For
even
Gilliston
pay our
Public.
mower man. And we only get a mower man once a week. We share it with 4 other schools.
At the end of the day, if I may be so bold, a suggestion could be you could reasonably build a school with fantastic facilities exactly where it is now in a constructed, progressive period of time that will be absolutely suitable and a good outcome for this region, this community. It doesn't need to be moved, and we don't need to do anything significant in regards to changing what's there other than just build the specific facilities that are required. The children can still attend their school. We can move things around to achieve this. The lower field, we're talking about the playing field, you could actually build a school there and then make the upper field where we have all the demountables, the playing area, for example. The facilities are there, the land's there, the community's there. We just need to put the infrastructure in.
Any other questions, Mr. Diao?
Yeah, look, apologies that I wasn't able to hear your opening statement. Just from what I can gather, I mean, it's an appalling state of affairs. I wonder whether you could tell us, what's the principal saying about their interactions with the department to try and remedy the situation at Gilliston?
Not a lot she can say.
Yeah.
To tell you the truth, I actually brought it up at the most recent PNC meeting about them actually apparently coming to look at our septic. She knows nothing about it, and I received that letter in January. So the department hasn't even come to her to say that they're going to come and look at the septic. So, and every time I mention, because I've been working alongside Jenny Aitchison quite a lot, doing some community meetings, currently doing a petition, things like that. Every time I mention it, I kind of get that they're not allowed to talk about it because it's politics, so they're not allowed to sway either way, and they've got to stay impartial. So I try not to bring up a lot because I know I'm not really going to get an answer.
She's very professional in her replies, but she's non-partisan and simple in her answers for purpose.
Is she able to communicate any of the kind of explanations that are provided by school infrastructure in relation to?
I'm not sure.
We get the
what she is
impression
allowed
that she's
to do.
pretty much the same boat as us by way of feedback. Yeah. And she's one of a number of principals we've had in succession there as well, mind you, but she's quite a capable principal. We hope you can hang on to this one.
Yes, Sarah, did you have anything extra to add there on WebEx? We don't want to leave you out.
That's okay. I think that Katie and Todd have covered most of the points that we really wanted to bring to your attention.
Thank you. Wes?
Thank you. Could I just inquire, the the schools that are planned for the area, we know there's a number of private schools that will be opening at some point in the future. Do you know when that might be and what they're expecting their enrolment numbers might be?
Personally, have no idea. I went to enrol my daughter into basketball the other day on Friday, and while I was in Services New South Wales app to get her Active Kids voucher, I typed in Gilliston and it came up Gilliston Heights Adventist School. It's the first time I ever heard about it.
It's news to us.
News, absolutely news to us.
This is very recent. This is like this week, last week?
Yeah, well, Friday is when I found it.
There you go.
And
there's been no announcements
there
on
has
media or
been
anything we've seen.
some construction at the local Adventist church, which formerly was called Gilliston Community Centre, but it was church owned and run. They're starting to pull it down now, so they must be starting construction now. So, but I have no numbers to give you on what their enrolment would be.
We just found out about this from Katie this morning.
Yeah.
Sorry, and the Catholic diocese, are they planning a school there as well? Is that
they have one in Maitland.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a very active school. We don't have school numbers on it, but a lot of people do send their children there for purpose.
You'll find in Wallace Creek, which is one of the new subdivisions, that there's a big block that they have left. And originally there was a big sign to say that it was going to be a brand new school, never alluded to the fact that if it was public or private. They have put a Catholic run early childhood centre at the front of it, and the back is all empty. So presuming they're going to attach on a school.
Mm-hmm. Well, new schools are welcome, but
Oh,
the problem is your school is substandard, and that's the thing that the government needs to be responsible for.
Yeah,
so.
and not all of us can afford to send our children to...
Understanding this committee will do a report that's going to go back to Parliament on the 28th of October, as I understand. And then, of course, Parliament will deliberate over that. And the city...
Well, we report initially, the government makes a response within 6 months.
Thank you.
Our main opportunity is that the Education Department will be here for our second day of hearing, which I think is on the 28th of May. Okay. So obviously your issue will bulk large in the comments we'll be making to the department, and we're hoping, from the exposure of the difficulties you've got, that the government would be prompted into moving a lot faster.
Thank you, Mr. Latham, because that's the point I was moving towards. I understand my understanding was the 28th of October is the report, but what could be done between here and now? I know you folks aren't the people responsible for that, but what can be done between here and there is where I was leading.
Well, I'll be visiting there for you in the beginning of June.
Thank you.
And
happy to meet you.
I'm hoping that the
I'll
opposition...
be there as well.
You would? Okay,
Yeah,
we'll organise a subcommittee to come up and have a look, and one would also assume that in the way of these things, the opposition would be continuing to put pressure on the government, and there's an election in New South Wales in March, and parties need to make commitments to bring your school up to an acceptable standard, because you've obviously been left behind, unless there's some incredible explanation for this. You've been left behind when the normal process is, if you know that urban development is coming, a country school needs to be upgraded with permanent buildings. We saw that at Schofields, which to me looked like a pretty good performance, but it hasn't been applied to you.
The response that I'm getting from Minister Mitchell's office is, Mr. Latham, is that our school is rural, and we do not require the appropriate fencing. Chicken wire is perfectly fine. My own son, sometimes he gets a little bit hot-headed and he can see that fence is a hurdle, so he jumped it.
But these are new suburban homes across the road from you.
Absolutely are. Absolutely are.
And there's more coming.
We are less than... How far would you say the main road is? The main road is very, very busy.
600 metres.
We have queues from Maitland roundabout all the way through Gilliston Heights on a morning.
Right. This is the road connecting Maitland and Cessnock.
Maitland,
If you
Maitland
refer to
to
my
Cessnock,
document
yes.
number 2, you'll see geographically where Gilliston
Uh-huh.
School is in comparison to Maitland Public School and Rutherford and East Maitland. They'll give you an idea of the dimensions there. So when we talk about this school being treated differently to the others because it's rural, I'm sorry, you need to redraw your lines in regards to what your class is rural. This is a metropolitan suburban area which is not being treated the same as the others.
But even if it's rural, it needs to be attended to.
They built us a McDonald's, Domino's, an IGA, but yet we're still rural. We can have a Macca's. I go get a Big Mac, whatever. Like, it's not fair. It's really not.
Well, thank you for bringing it to our attention. Thank you for your
Thank
passion.
you. Thank you for your
and
time.
caring about
Very
your,
much
your
appreciate it.
children so comprehensively, and of course we're going to try and do something to assist, especially as we find out more information and visit there ourselves and put more pressure on the government to correct a wrong.
Thank you, Mr. Latham.
As
I'll just
PNC
ask
President,
also,
I would love to show you around, Mr. Latham.
Yeah, we'll be there.
Yeah.
I'd like to, again, I'd like to keep
Anthony
this
Diadam
as
at least,
bipartisan
so
as we can,
we'll be
if
there.
possible. I'd love to see Mr. Mr. Fang, and Mr. Farlow. You're more than welcome to come. I would very dearly love to see Liberal and Labor there with yourself. I would think that if you were not to be there, it would be a gaping hole. It would be really, really important to see.
Yeah, well, our committee tends to operate that way, and we try to do what's right. So we'll try and help.
I've invited the department several times to come and have a look because I'm pretty sure they're looking at a 2010 Google Maps. But Minister Mitchell doesn't respond to my messages directly.
Thanks for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll adjourn for lunch now. Thanks for the affirmation, starting with Henry. Thank you.
My name's Henry Regendra, Deputy President, New South Wales Teachers Federation. It's an affirmation. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Greg?
And I'm Greg Butler, a Research Industrial Officer at the New South Wales Teachers Federation. And I solemnly and sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. And Henry and Greg, it's available to you to make a short statement if you wanted to before we go to committee questions.
Yes, I'd like to make a few opening remarks. First and foremost, as officers of the New South Wales Teachers Federation, we strongly believe that our students deserve the highest standard of school and classroom infrastructure, whether it's in metropolitan areas of New South Wales, regional and rural, irrespective of socioeconomic status. All our students deserve that high quality. We also believe that an infrastructure program adequate enough to deal with the existing need and, of course, with the projected growth in student numbers. But, of course, to maintain that particular program of works, recognising the priority that is necessary for our school communities in the Northern Rivers area that have been devastated by the floods. I also just want to take this opportunity to update this inquiry in terms of important data, courtesy of what we've learned from the department's submission. We want to put on record that we do take notice that the department forecasts, and this is a big concern for ours, that they project that there'll be an increase of 180,000 students from an 820,000 figure to 1 million by 2039, and that should be something of serious consideration of this inquiry. We also want to put on record, and I think with this in our submission, the Auditor General's report that warned that under current funding levels, it will not deliver the classrooms we need beyond from 2023 onwards, and they call for a 10-year plan that factors all these things in, particularly in terms of enrolment growth, where they're going to be, etc. It's important for me to also say two more things, and this goes to the issue of climate. With respect to the 2019-2020 bushfires and the recent floods, that there are multiple lines of scientific evidence that show that the incidence of these extreme weather events will increase as the planet warms, and the impacts on our teachers, our students and their communities will only get worse. This government has a responsibility to consider the impacts of climate change when it looks at school infrastructure, not just in terms of how the decisions makes it in this area can contribute to either increasing or reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but also in terms of mitigating the risks of climate change. Every school and every TAFE college, whether it's a new or existing building, must be climate resilient and able to provide a safe environment for teaching and learning. And more to the point, our most severely affected areas in terms of the impacts of climate change, heat, for example, are also our most disadvantaged communities, e.g. Western Sydney. In January 2020, Penrith, for example, registered as the hottest place on Earth, reaching a high of 48.9 degrees, breaking records that have gone back 80 years. Finally, I just want to make a comment about this goes obviously within infrastructure, but it also goes to the heart of the commitment by any government, but particularly this government, the provision of public preschooling in this state. And I think we need to pay sharp attention to this incredibly poor, I guess, set of priorities of the government, the lack of public preschooling. We have over 1,700...
Chair, I'm going to make the point that this is not part of the inquiry. It's also not part of the terms of reference. And look, the fact that the gentleman is still here and haven't walked out with Scott in my presence, that's great. But, you know, I think we're well past the terms of reference now.
Well, I'm going to allow the witness latitude of making an opening statement, which from what I've heard so far is...
I'm not sure that
within
preschool education is quite the remit of school infrastructure, but by all means, you know, the Teachers Federation have wide remits.
To the
point of order,
Anthony.
There's
a number of situations where preschools are part of the build, and clearly that's within the terms of reference of this.
Yeah,
inquiry.
preschools can be co-located with schools, of course, that's true. So, Henry, I'll rule you in order, but ask you to stick as closely to the terms of reference as possible, and then we can get to questions.
Absolutely, and I appreciate the opportunity to just expand on that. Public preschools, where they are, the 100 in New South Wales, are not only co-located with our public schools, they're actually part of our system. And to the point, we also have a Minister for Education who also has responsibilities for early learning, and schools infrastructure also have a responsibility in this space. So I just wanted to be upfront. That is something that needs strong attention, not only from an infrastructure point of view, but for the learning of our children. The evidence has long been in, they need it, and particularly in our most disadvantaged communities. And I'll finish my opening comments there. Thanks.
Thank you. If I could just start with the questioning. In your submission, there was a statement that design must follow pedagogy, not the converse. Could you elaborate on the meaning of that, please?
Sure. Regrettably, the experience of some schools, whether they're going through a significant upgrade, a rebuild, etc., there has been often, maybe conflict's a strong word, but there's certainly been processes that are put in place where pedagogy, what happens in our classroom, what are our rewards, what does the class sizes look like, are inferior, have not been prioritised compared to what an architect may want a school to look like. Post the build of these unfortunate circumstances, the experience of these schools is that they find something that they then have to fix up. For example, many schools, not many, there were some schools that had that open space learning. It was a fad. In fact, it's been a fad for over 40 years, but fads as they are, they reinvent themselves and someone wants to own it. And this has occurred over recent years. And open space learning is where they combine 3 classrooms or more into one big space, and there's no walls in between. And when teachers and students return to that rebuilt site, they're then left with this quandary of, well, what do you do? This is just not fit for purpose in terms of teaching and learning. Then you have to retrofit the whole site there in terms of putting in walls. So what we call for, architects are absolutely necessary, but they've got to work with teachers, with experts, those that know what's required of the classroom, what student needs there are, and critically around student need, the complexity within one class, let alone across a whole school, has to be factored in when you conduct these builds. So there's been some issues around what is the priority, and we strongly insist, and we continue to work with the Department of Education, with schools infrastructure, try and reach a point where there's an understanding that we don't go from an unfortunate build that can sometimes turn into an industrial issue. Teachers have had enough, and then where we're going from school to school, we want to have clear direction about how this is addressed by way from the top down to the school level.
Right. So when you say it's a 40-year fad, and I share your scepticism, what is the Teachers Federation policy on these design issues that maximise student performance? Because there's kind of 2 strands to this inquiry. One is obviously, quality buildings, provision for students, particularly in growth areas or where there's been a surge in population in an older area and the school hasn't kept up. So there's sort of like the physical infrastructure, and then there's a second strand to our inquiry, perhaps not as front line, that design also bears relevance to how we can lift student performance. And a lot of the evidence shows that these open space learning classes, so-called, as you say, amalgamating 3 or 4, they don't maximise the results that the school would be wanting.
Yes, it has some of the studies that I've seen over time, particularly when this was such a hot issue back in 2018, less so now, but a hot issue was there was no consideration on the impact of those in terms of anxiety, those that have hearing difficulties. And it was quite regrettable because, you know, the fad goes ahead in terms of priority of the needs of our kids, and it's really unfortunate. You see this played out in places, and it impacts on those kids, and our teachers know it first and foremost, and of course parents. So we're working with the department to come up with a very clear position. What was called open space learning was once called flexible learning spaces. It couldn't be more inflexible by its design, because you couldn't do anything more than have those 3 classes into one. Have an English class here next to a drama class. It was just incredible. So we're insisting, we're hoping we can reach some form of agreement with the department. There is a set standard in terms of a design, and no longer completely open up to bespoke design plans from school to school. We're hoping that we can reach, and we're confident that we can reach an agreement with the Department of Education, that we can have a uniform application of what a rebuild or a new school looks like, that factors in the needs of our students, that factors in the expertise of our teachers, also factors in conditions that are related to the award, class sizes within the staffing agreement, etc. And I think there could be, I'm hopeful of a sensible outcome with regard to this. It has come courtesy of some strong positions that were established by the union back in 2018 at our annual conference on this particular matter, and we've been pursuing schools infrastructure throughout that time. Clearly, we wanted to have settled this much earlier, but we're hopeful that we'll get some form of understanding that this would be a positive agreed
so
approach.
You've been trying to reach heads of agreement about this question?
Correct.
Is there an expectation that might be achieved before the, say, March election and the Parliament, goes into recess?
I'm hoping for right now. I'm trying. We're trying our best. Phone calls continue to be regularly made, but we'll continue to pursue it. But the conversations have been very positive in this particular area.
Okay. Well, that sounds like you're making more progress than I make with the department at estimates when I raise this problem, the hearing issues,
Give me a call next
distractions,
time.
the open space learning, where the department just said, "Oh no, it's just flexibility." So I've heard the patter over the years, and none of it impresses me. Can I just finally ask, is the Federation aware of this document here, Exploring Fit-for-Purpose Contemporary Learning Spaces, which has been sent to me? It's now off their website, and it appears to be a School Infrastructure New South Wales literature search about what works in school design for lifting student results. I'll take it up with the department. I think a lot of the conclusions they reach about John Hattie's research in here are just not valid. But is the Federation aware of this document? I'm going to circulate it to the committee, because it seems to be driving some of the decisions about design without a valid evidence base. So what are the documents that you've relied on in negotiating with the department as to this approach on design?
I've not seen that particular document to answer your question, but in terms of the arguments that we've put forward go to the experiences of teachers. We've also, as I've said before, we've cited academic research in terms of impact on young people, particularly those with complex needs. We also go to, we still have our awards and staffing agreements that dictate what happens in a classroom. And of course, in terms of the experience of our teachers, it goes to the issue around the expectations of curriculum and lesson preparation and so on.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a Macquarie University study that shows that it's very hard for hearing impaired students, particularly at the back of these shared spaces, to even hear what's going on. And if you get a student, it's not in their personality to sort of arc up about it. They're disadvantaged by that reality, which leaves them further and further behind. But I might at this stage table the document for the committee, and we can explore that later on. Other questions, Anthony D'Adam?
thanks for your attendance today. You talk about the Ponds High School and Riverbank Public School in your submission. We've, as a committee, have gone out and inspected the Riverbank Public School. It's a school, you know, about a decade ago, you know, a school with over 1,000, a primary school with over 1,000 kids was like considered unusual. Riverbank's got more than 2,000 students. It seems that the department is increasingly building schools of a sort of massive scale, and I wanted to ask you what your views are about that apparent trend in terms of the approach to building these large-scale schools rather than the sort of, you know, mid-sized schools of 300-400 student capacity.
The other thing also to point out, and clearly such big schools can be quite difficult in terms of what parents would prefer. For example, in Murwillumbah, with the collapse of the four schools into two has caused significant distress, where parents that have felt comfortable going to their smaller, particularly the primary schools, and then with the prospect of going to a larger one, it's unsettled quite a number of parents.
Sorry. The parents are unsettled by it.
Yeah, so the conversations that I've had with those parents up there when I visited, one of the bit of the feedbacks I asked them, how do you feel about this? And those in the current schools, when they said, look, we're quite concerned about going to a big site with a lot of people, and they prefer their smaller school.
You use the words like distress.
Yeah.
The parents are distressed by this.
Correct. That's what I observed. This is when I went there at the end of 2020.
Right.
Yeah.
And what distresses them about it?
Well, it's just that their child, they're used to having their small, almost village type feel school, and this
distress is quite a descriptive word, though. I mean,
yeah, well, I'm telling you, that's what they. That's what I saw. I'm physical with them, and they're telling me, and they're quite concerned.
When you say distress, I mean, what's distressing about it for them?
Like I said, going into en masse into a big site where the two high schools coming into one.
This is the parents you're talking about.
I beg your pardon?
This is the parents you're talking
about.
Yeah,
let me finish my answer. Yeah, sure. When the two high schools come into on one site and the two primary then are also on the same site, they've got this visual that this is because people have used the word mega and etc. and that is causing them the distress.
Can't imagine that.
One of the issues that was raised with us, one of the schools that we visited, also a large school, I think was it Gledswood Hills or Gregory Hills? I think.
Which one, mate?
It's Gledswood Hills.
Gregory Hills isn't built yet.
Gregory Hills is the one that wasn't built. Gledswood Hills, where that school, it's also over 1,000 students. One of the issues was about the number of people converging on the site at the end of school, at the end of the school day for pickup and pickup. Do you have some comments about that as an issue in terms of student and teacher safety?
Yeah, so that goes to logistics, obviously. It's a massive effort. It's not just 1,000 students, it's everyone else that goes along with that. You got teachers. So we would want to hope that when planning does happen for such sites, that all these factors are taken into consideration, plus other traffic and so on, and parents pick up. And of course, public transport, we would hope that as part of the overall design and modelling, these things are looked at. The other thing, just coming back to the examples that you mentioned earlier, is once you build these, and we'll accept some of these schools are looking fantastic, but then within a nanosecond, or a short period of time, we're then faced with demountables being brought onto site, and I think that's just a regrettable. Regrettably, it's a lack of planning, and these demountables stay for a number of years, and we would hope that we should not have this appetite within schools' infrastructure and the department to have demountables when hopefully they've been informed by quality demographic data about the growth in that community, and therefore you'd have less reliance on demountables. So that's something that we've raised with the department as well on a number of occasions.
One of the issues that we also noticed at the Riverbank Public School was given the scale, the lack of play space. I think we're advised that Riverbank Public School has 5.52 metres squared per student, which is half of the recommended play space that should be provided for children. Does that have an impact on behaviour management? Is that a factor in terms of if there's not enough space for the kids to run around and exercise and play, can that affect the behavioural issues in a school?
Of course, it's difficult on any given playground duty, and those that have done it, the dynamics and the wrangling that you have to work with. And clearly, I recall my times out in Western Sydney at the school that I taught at. But also, I think what I would really want to point out is, yes, behaviour issues, but in terms of play space and the importance of it, it goes to that social development. And I think, again, this comes back to pedagogy before design. The playground is an important part of schooling. It's not just a lunch break or a morning tea break. This is part of their social development. And a lot of kids' skills are developed in such sometimes less structured ways like you would in a classroom. And it's important that kids have that space to engage with their peers in that environment.
One of the things that we were advised by the officials who accompanied us on our visits was that for new builds for primary schools, they're actually not planning to provide substantial playing fields for organised sporting activities, PWSA. Do you have some comments about the impact that might have on the delivery of the curriculum?
This is play space.
Play space.
Yeah, of course. There's things that that is part of whether it's PDHPE or other activities that the school engages in. You need this space. Now, I'm no expert in terms of what the available land was at the time, etc. But it would be a shame if, particularly with newer estates, that it's the public infrastructure that needs to take priority, and you build around that. Set up the public infrastructure, whether it's roads, whether it's hospitals, and of course, whether it's schools. And the population is going to grow. It sort of baffles me when I see that sometimes that's not the overall consideration. I think just some level of common sense would help in terms of when newer communities, newer estates are established. But again, I'm not an expert on that, but that's what I observe.
Ms. Boyd?
Thank you, and good afternoon. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the impact of, I guess, shabby facilities on staff and teachers. Obviously, this is a place of education, but it is also a place of work. Can you talk a little bit about the impact, I guess, that it has on morale, and also whether there is examples of schools that don't really meet the minimum standards for safe workplaces?
This goes, if I to pick up this sentiment and your actual questions there, this goes to the issue of respect, and our teachers are absolutely dedicated to their students, and equally parents are very supportive of the work that's conducted in our schools. When you're working in many schools, in fact, that are substandard, I would argue that it's a reflection of the lack of respect from the department, etc., in terms of the work that teachers do and what students engage in. It does impact on morale. It does impact when you sometimes want to question whether you want to go to the toilet that is not of an appropriate standard. It does impact on the sensory needs of our students, whether it is about smells and so on. These things have to be factored in. I wish, I visited the Parramatta department office. I wish all schools had that standard. I wish all schools had that standard. And quite frankly, I'm not sure whoever thought it was a good idea to build this new Department of Education could actually live with themselves knowing there are schools throughout the state that come nowhere near the standards that are applied to that Parramatta office, and I've been in that office. It's
Right.
great to walk in.
Can
on
you
our kids.
elaborate? What do we? I've not been there. I don't get invited.
Go
but,
for a
maybe
visit.
you
It's
can
Phillip
just-
Street in Parramatta.
Yeah, but what are you referring to?
So it's the Department of Education's
Yeah,
head
yeah,
office.
yeah. But what is it about it that's?
It's brand new.
It's brand new. Yeah, luxurious.
Luxurious.
Nice, clean, functional toilets
Absolutely.
connected to the sewerage.
It's got respect.
Got respect.
It's got respect, and I visit a lot of schools. I'm looking forward to heading up to Newcastle in the next couple of days, up to Tamworth, etc. next week. I'm delighted by meeting up with the kids and the teachers. Kids in particular, they make your day, but you can't help but glance around and know that things could be a bit better in terms of the facilities that
Right.
they have.
We should put the department in demountables.
Well, do what you want to do with them, but
So they get the feeling.
But I, what gets me up in the morning is I want the best for our kids.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say the best, I'm not talking gold plated. I'm just talking that you can't. I can't look kids in the face and walk away going, oh well, fly in, fly out. I've seen that matter. Our kids matter. Every single kid matters, particularly those in our more complex and struggling communities.
Is it not a bit class warfare-ish to go, but the department have, a new building in Parramatta, but, X, Y, Z. When you say luxuries, what do you mean luxuries? I mean, it's an office space that the department meet at, work and do the functions of a government department providing schools across the state.
Couldn't agree more. We're not begrudging our colleagues that also work in there. What we're saying is there are different standards.
But you said, you talked luxuries. The picture you're painting, I think, is and look, it's to your benefit, obviously. But what is it that you think that they are getting that are not provided to say, a teacher at a secondary or primary school? What additional things are they provided?
Well, there's technology for one. It's an outstanding look. I'm not begrudging the department. Let's just be very clear.
Well,
I'm talking about.
You've made some comments.
I wouldn't mind finishing answering my question too.
Yeah, I know. You've made some comments about this.
Point of order.
Yeah, no, order. The witness should finish his answer, which
by all means.
will be recapping the point that we want all facilities, schools up to a
Correct.
standard.
This is about standards, and whoever came up with that, they should apply it to all schools across the state.
But what is it? That's what I'm asking. What?
Well, there's technology. There's upkeep. Hopefully, you've been to some of our schools where the standards are so obvious that they need improvements on. Torn carpets, windows that can't open or close or can't open, blinds that are. It's just disrespectful. And all I'm saying is, I'm pointing out the obvious. There is a standard that's been applied. I like it. It should be applied to every school across the state without argument.
I'm going to reiterate the point because
I think this question's already been asked.
Well,
we don't even know what he's asked.
Yeah, I mean,
I started by saying I'm going to reiterate the point.
I'm going to reiterate the point that I'm unclear about what it is that you think the department staff in Parramatta have over other employees of the education department.
He's already asked this question.
Yeah, I think we'll take that as having been answered previously, and just for the committee, we visited Concord High where they've got pretty ordinary toilet facilities in 6 or 7 different spots on the campus. So
there's no demountable toilets, I'm assuming, at the department.
No, I think we can safely work on that assumption. Mr. D'Adam, your question.
I wanted to just come back to Riverbank Public School. One of the things that I noticed when we were on our site visit was the absence of trees. You sort of mentioned the environmental impact. Another observation that was made by the representatives from the department who were accompanying us on our visits was the preference for shifting to artificial turf for play spaces as opposed to natural grass. I wonder whether you can perhaps offer some comments about that, whether there's any issues associated with a shift to, say, AstroTurf in schools rather than having, natural grass from an environmental, but also from, I suppose, a behavioural student management kind of aspect as well.
Yeah, and of course, excuse me, in terms of what's best for the environment, in terms of risk mitigation, in terms of extreme heat, the natural environment would, from my point of view, I guess, would be preferable. Having trees is something in terms you talked about morale earlier on. It's just good for the soul, I think. But in terms of the environment, the more that we can commit, particularly on our sites, to whether with the whole aspect of climate and the environment, the plenty of trees, and of course in terms of solar, all these factors are important as an overall aspect in terms of the environment.
And tree canopy can have a cooling effect, of course, on school infrastructure, on students themselves when they're outside at play. It's been suggested to me that in midsummer, when you've got AstroTurf, that actually it gets incredibly hot, and then the kids can't sit down on the ground. Is that correct?
I'm not directly familiar with that, but I guess it would make sense to me if you've got concrete underneath that AstroTurf, for example. It's not like the natural environment where you can absorb that heat.
I guess when we look at instances like at the moment where we've got a lot of rain, though, that when it comes to AstroTurf, you can use it a lot more often than you can when it comes to natural grass, where you might have an oval that's closed off for weeks or the like. So, and that's why a lot of councils have moved across to play spaces that are AstroTurfed as well to be able to get more use out of them.
Now, Riverbank, they're building the AstroTurf as their play area, and the principal was pretty excited about it, actually. And I suppose for soccer and hockey, the level surface is, it's pluses and minuses. I suppose it is a bit warmer, but for hockey and soccer, it's a level surface for the competitive sport, not as irregular as the old back paddock.
Look, one of the things, so we look at schools with large numbers of enrolments, and I think all of us, when we hear the numbers 2,000 kids at a school, like it's jarring in terms of that number. And of course, there's difficulties and challenges with a school like that. But I think from seeing a school like Riverbank, we see it's sort of a victim of its own success in the sense that people want to go to that school because it's a high-performing school. We've seen it with other schools as well, like a Westmead Public School, for instance, where you've got a school down the road that's under-enrolled, but people want to go to that school because of its performance and because of its academic results. Is that something you're seeing sort of across the network of schools, where you do have sort of a honeypot, so to speak, where people actually want to enrol in their schools because of their success?
Have I seen it?
Yeah.
Yes, I've seen schools where one's much larger than the other, and there's a whole range of factors as well. So, for example, not every school community has a support class or a support unit, and that can impact on whether their enrolments are large or small. Sometimes the facilities just give the school away, the shiny school down the road. But we would certainly believe, or we stand by, that there are drawing areas for our schools, and that's just not only critical in terms of maximising public infrastructure, that we're not underutilising sites when it's overutilised elsewhere, but it's also the sense of community, and to be someone that you're from that street, you're playing with your neighbours, and you're going to the same school. That for us is also part of that greater, broader aspect of the provision of public education, particularly for that community, and we would subscribe to that particular view as our position.
So I guess in a sense, one of the challenges with the drawing area comes, and we heard it today, I think from the Lennox Head community, about where they've had a change in the drawing area of the school, and that has a significant impact in the community. But the alternative is that you maintain a drawing area, but for at least a period of time you have more demountables and potentially less play space in those schools as well. Isn't that the challenge and the balance you've got to strike?
Yeah, and I think this also comes to planning well ahead, would really assist in how that all unfolds. And I think certainly from my observations, that insufficient planning has led to some of these moments, regrettably, where the demand on demountables, or it's unforeseen that there's a new estate that's been established. It feels like a bit of an afterthought about the impact on that school. We would prefer that it's more at the front end of the conversation when it comes to the provision not just provision, but the actual, how big that school is and are they ready, etc. And would there be a need for another school further down the road to try and take the load, I guess, of a growing community?
Other questions from the committee?
I wanted to ask about, you speak about the cumulative capital investment gap. I wonder if in your submission between the public system and non-government schools. And earlier in the hearing, we had a document provided to us which lists the New South Wales government's building grants assistance scheme to non-government schools, which it provides for a sort of extensive expenditure on capital for the private system. Can you perhaps elaborate a bit more on that aspect of your submission?
Yeah, so it doesn't give us any great joy when, firstly, the 10-year plans, something that I think we'll all be very interested in, particularly when the Auditor General makes such a finding, and of course what goes with that is a funding commitment, knowing that there is a lot of work to be done in this particular area. When we've got a federal government that's throwing $1.9 billion at the privates for capital and zero to us, that hurts. That, and then you add the $500 million for non-govs over 4 years for infrastructure, when we've got such a massive need, and there are a number of private schools that will benefit for that investment when they're overfunded as it is, in terms whether it's their SR equivalent to in comparison to the SRS, but also in terms of the infrastructure that they enjoy compared to the substandard that's delivered to our public schools. Clearly, these are things that stand out to us, that stand out to our public school communities, and it's something that needs to be addressed. Where I would want to hope that public schools are the priority from the government. Government schools are a priority of the government when it comes to infrastructure. So we believe that there needs to be, that needs to be addressed. It is unfair to our public schools that it exists in this way in terms of the carve-up of expenditure, and therefore that's why we wanted to make that particular point.
Earlier we heard from the parents and citizens of Gilliston Public School, and it seemed that almost that the government were aware of the growth in population in the area, and it seemed as if they were perhaps even holding back in terms of investment in the hope that the non-government sector would move into the area and build schools. Did you see that as a trend elsewhere in the state? Is that something that your members are reporting to you?
I've not heard specifically that particular school, but I want to make this point that the first school in any community should be a public school. In fact, it must be a public school, and not as you've suggested there that they're wishing and praying that if we hold back, that there would be a private school come in that place. That would be appalling if that was the position.
I was just going to say, to pick up on this private school funding model. Look, in the last year's budget, we saw $3.2 million given to public school, well, state government infrastructure when it came to capital expenditure of government schools. The figures you talk about, a $1.9 billion program from the feds over 10 years, so equivalent of that, you're looking at about $80 million a year for New South Wales schools.
Zero for us.
A $500 million program at a state level over 4 years, so there's about $125 million each year. And looking through this school grants project, we're not looking at like Scots College or something. We're looking at, Catherine McCauley Catholic College in Medowie. We're looking at, what are typically low fee Catholic and independent schools that are in there, often in developing areas. So it's not like effectively this is this class war, as Mr. Fang was talking about before. We're talking about schools that are often in areas of need where parents are struggling, trying to pay for their kids to go to a private school, and making their own contribution as well, with some part contribution from the state government.
We've had decades of neglect when it comes to our schools' infrastructure, decades. And the announcement of a schools infrastructure in 2017, of course, that's a step in the right direction, but it's got a massive amount of catch-up for
Indeed,
us.
that's why there's been a 7-fold increase in spending over the last 6 years.
But we need to see a 10-year plan to make sure that we're capturing, one, the needs as they stand now, but also the massive growth in enrolments that we're going to see into our public schools in the order of 180,000 by 2039. These things, when they left unattended, gives us fear that we're going to go through another period of time, but we're not keeping up, or indeed catching up from the past when it comes to upgrades. I'm not trying to make anything up here. We've had the neglect. We just want a program of rebuild. We just want a program where we can confidently say, we can sit down and go, right, here's the 10-year plan. There's an accompanying investment, projections, forward estimate, whatever, in terms of that kind of commitment. That will give us far more confidence than going through from budget to budget where we're not entirely convinced that our public school needs, upgrade and growth would be matched.
Can I just pick up on that theme that you've alluded to in your answer to Mr. Farlow there? You've said that there's decades upon decades of failure. So that would presumably mean that you've obviously taken aim at this government, but it would also then mean the failure of the previous government beforehand. So,
correct.
So I imagine that in that instance, there's not a lot of trust with them either. Have you had the opportunity to speak with perhaps the Shadow Minister for Education or the Leader of the Opposition? And what commitments have they given you that they will be delivering? Should they be any other matter in terms of reference? I'm well within the terms of reference. I'm asking the Teachers Federation. No. Well, I'll ask the chair to rule, but I believe I'm well within the terms of reference, Chair, and I'm just simply asking the Teachers Federation representatives that are appearing before us today, what commitments have been given by the Shadow Minister or the Leader of the Opposition about school infrastructure and the 10-year plan?
I think it's a good question. In fact, since I was...
It's a great question, I would have thought. But,
I won't go that far. But since when I was a teacher out in Western Sydney, I was a Fed rep, been hitting up politicians of all flavours. Like I said to you before, the thing that gets me up in the morning is what's best for our kids. We don't see it through the lens of political parties. We talk with everyone, and anyone that wants to listen, we will advocate for our kids to the utmost, because that's our priority. Being in the classroom as a teacher, there is only one focus, and you want the best. You want the best for our kids. So that to answer your good question is that we lobby as much as possible on not just on infrastructure, clearly, but a whole range of things. And we're certainly continue to call history as it is. Previous governments, all flavours, have let our schools down.
But I imagine that in the interest of attracting your respect again, and you've used the word respect previously, that they would have committed to you a number of things. I guess I'm asking on the infrastructure program, what commitments have been given to Teachers Federation about...
I'm taking a point of order. You've already asked the question.
I know, but it wasn't addressed in the answer. I'm just simply asking for an elucidation of that.
That was the answer that the witness chose to give. That's it.
I'm just asking for an elucidation of it now. And again, that's well within the terms of reference. It's well within the procedural fairness resolution, and I'd say it's actually in order, Chair.
It's not the type of question we normally field at the committee, and we probably need to. We probably need to rely on the openness of the Federation, which is never backward in coming forward with its views in the lead up to the next state election, and I'm sure if there's any inadequacy in anyone's policy, we'll find out about it. So it might be best to move on to other questions at that point.
I'll take that as a no, but
well, it's not something that the witness needs to answer, and
it doesn't have to.
It's not something we're interrogating.
It'd be good for transparency.
Brewcar's policy is not being interrogated by the committee.
You raise a really interesting point in your submission about car parking for staff. My partner's a teacher, and I know she routinely lugs, kids' books home for marking and has to take them back. If you don't have parking on site, if you're parking on the street, then you're often lugging quite heavy objects a long way. What is the commitment, or what is the current arrangements in terms of provision of staff parking for new builds? Is it adequate? Can it be improved?
They should be taking public transport, shouldn't they?
Are you answering or
no? Orderways. Come on, let's get to the answer.
So, the ones that have been raised with us, we've taken up with schools infrastructors. Say, look, there's insufficient parking. For many of our teachers, public transport just doesn't cut it. Well, sometimes in those areas it's not sufficient from where they're travelling from. But like you said, carrying resources, work doesn't stop at 3 o'clock and everyone toddles off home as a teacher. I think it's quite evident over the commentary over particularly the last couple of years, people getting to know the work of teachers. Teachers take their work home. You know, I'm related to teachers. I know their work. It's incredible. And so they do need that opportunity where they're supported by way of having the confidence of rocking up to school with all their resources and things they've taken home to work on, whether it's on the weekend or at nights, being able to comfortably and safely carry their equipment and resources and kids' work back into school.
And presumably, if a school goes over its enrolment, basic enrolment, the provision for staff parking, because staff obviously increases with the enrolment, then that cascades into a problem in terms of staff access to parking and parking spaces.
Yeah. It does become a problem, as does the need for additional toilet facilities as well. They usually don't increase as classrooms are delivered.
Any other questions? I've just got one that you might like to take it on notice, just to provide more information about the Federation's policy for ideal school design for maximising student results, and if you're able to, any more information about attempts to build that into an agreement with the government for these infrastructure issues. But any extra information you can provide on that front would be useful to the committee. So if you're able to take that as on notice and come back to us, that would be very much appreciated.
Will do.
Any other questions around the table? If not, we can thank Henry and Greg. Greg, did you have any final comments you wanted to throw in? Something we've missed?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for your time.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
And we appreciate the contribution very much. So we'll carry forward. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
The